Encouraged to follow at London Assembly on various social media platforms. When using X, please include the hashtag #AssemblyPlanning for this meeting. Before we begin, we have a few items of business to attend to. Can I now ask our committee clerk, Sal Fazal, to confirm any apologies for today's meeting?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies have been received from Assembly Member Moema.
Thank you. Can I ask the committee to note the recommendation set out at item 2 and ask if members have any other interest to declare? Can I ask the committee to note the ongoing actions arising from the previous meetings and the additional correspondence received? Noted. We now move on to our main item of business.
Chair.
Member Boff.
I'd just like to outline my extreme concerns about the imbalance of this investigation. We have suggested people to be called to give evidence who take a contrary view that the Greenbelt can be sacrificed for a new town project. And so this has become a single-sided investigation that does not take into account the many concerns that there are in London about building on the Greenbelt and on parkland. I thought I'd put that out there, and my views and the views of the Conservative group will be reflected in the outputs for this investigation. So we, we're just asking people whose opinions we already know. So thank you.
Thank you for that intervention, Assembly Member Boff. We now move on to our main item of business, a discussion on new towns for London. We've structured our meeting into 2 panels, and I would like to welcome our guests for the first panel. In the chamber we have David Christie, Head of Growth and Master Planning at Transport for London, Soumya Partha-Sarathi, Director Arup and New Towns Task Force Member, and Kate Greenway, Project Director, Thamesmead Waterfront, Peabody. Thank you very much for joining us. The first question will be from myself, and it is to Soumya and Kate, and it is: why are Thamesmead and Cruise Hill and Chase Park the best locations in London for a new town?
Thank you. Perhaps I'll go first. Is my mic on? Yes, okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to start off by saying the process that the task force followed to select the sites. So obviously we were given a very high-level remit by government, which is to come up with a number of sites that help unlock economic development and accelerate the pace of housing. Once we received that remit, we obviously, as we started our work, expanded that a little bit to understand what that really meant. And we said, yes, it must unlock economic growth, it must accelerate housing delivery, but any site selected must also be set within a broader strategic context, keeping in mind parallel initiatives such as the industrial strategy, the infrastructure strategy, and so pick locations where it makes sense to have new towns, and also the criteria of building thriving communities and good places. So not just housing numbers, but actually using this as a catalyst to build great communities. So that we expanded the remit a little. And then early on, we did 2 things. We had a call for sites, which we put out in November of last year, actually the year before, because what we didn't want to do was pick sites which didn't already have a degree of momentum and ownership. So we wanted to pick sites from what people put forward. And while that was happening, we developed some criteria for selecting and evaluating these sites when they came us. The criteria included a relatively good proportion of land ownership under single control. It could be public, it could be private. The existing transport or potential transport links that were already being planned, because connectivity would be very important for any site selected. Value for money for public investment. Some momentum for the sites to move into planning in this parliament, because the government was really keen to accelerate development. And the ability for these sites to provide a minimum of 40% affordable housing and good placemaking and potential for developing sort of identity. So these were our criteria. We received, I think, about 5 or 6 applications from London. We received 100 in total. And all of those sites went through a series of sort of evaluations. And the 2 sites in London best I think, fit in with that criteria that we came up with. So.
Yeah, I was just going to add, Thames Waterfront is one of the largest strategic growth opportunities across London. We as Peabody, we're a majority landowner. We have a delivery partnership in place with Lendlease. We have now the level of commitment we have around the DLR extension to Thamesmead. So we feel this is one of the biggest growth opportunities for London to benefit both Thamesmead and the rest of London. And that's why we submitted a call for sites application through the process and have been working with all partners around how we could potentially bring this forward as a new town.
Thank you. And Soumya, you mentioned the other sites in London that were put forward. Did you think any of those could be good locations? Was it a tough decision to select the two that went ahead, or were the other ones considerably less good alternatives?
I think the other sites, they were quite varied sites that were in the pool, really. And some of them were much more sort of regeneration focused, their proposals. And we very much wanted to pick sites where quite a lot of housing could be developed in somewhat of a new construct, just because you could then develop that identity. And so while obviously London has to provide quite a large amount of housing, and if Enfield and Thamesmead can show the way on how to build at pace and with good identity and high quality and affordability, then those principles could be taken to some of the other sites. But of the candidates, it seemed that these two would show the way much better than the others.
Thank you. Assemblymember Boff.
Ms. Parthasarathi, what were we talked about the criteria for choosing those towns. Was one of the criteria to respect the Green Belt?
It was part of the broader criteria, but we followed government guidance that grey belt could be released. So I wouldn't say it was a cut-off criteria.
Was that with or without a definition of what grey belt is?
We followed the definition that the government set on what kind of grey belt could be released for housing. So we didn't query that any further.
Now, the new towns, we're calling them new towns, but they're not legally new towns, are they? Because new towns are a specific thing under the 1946 Act. But why are we calling them new towns? It could be confusing for people, because new towns have generally been successful.
Yes, and we hope these will be too. We did look at, obviously, the 3 generations of new towns. We studied sort of other large settlement designs, such as eco-towns, garden towns, garden communities. We looked at all of that, and we thought there was best alignment with the principles of the new towns from 46 and the 2 subsequent tranches. We did start off by with a not an assumption, but I guess an expectations that we would be able to pick standalone new towns, like the Milton Keynes of the past. But as we were looking, we're in a completely different world. And so it was very clear that we had to expand the definition of new towns. And we included things like sort of urban extensions.
Forgive me, you expanded the definition of new towns?
Yes.
Without legislation?
The legislation will follow. I think this is more, we looked at it more as a branding and many of the principles of how these new towns will be delivered according to the report that we've submitted to government are aligned with the old new towns principles. So we thought we would use that term.
Of course, part of the new towns legislation, it went hand in hand with the Green Belt legislation, which was originated at the same time, and they were both 2 halves of the same planning intent. Do you have any a criteria to respect Green Belt in your proposals?
Well, our proposals include grey belt release in some cases.
Yes.
This report is a recommendation to government, and any decision on respecting green belt or anything else will now be taken by government.
I understand you're doing what you were asked to do, but what's the difference between the new towns that are being proposed and urban expansion?
I think the current new towns contain a variety of typologies. So if you see the 12 new towns that are in the report, some of them are standalone, like Adlington in Cheshire. Some are urban extensions. I would say Thamesmead is probably one of those.
Yes.
And then some are actually possibly identifiable places within existing cities. I would say Victoria North in Manchester or South Bank in Leeds are those kinds of places. And the reason we thought it fit to expand that definition is because what we were asked to do was look at places which could deliver a minimum of 10,000 units, and actually some of our existing cities and peri-urban areas offer good infrastructure skeleton to actually deliver a community of that scale, and we thought it's better that we use that existing infrastructure. So it's not standalone new towns, but it's a variety. So it's, I guess, a definition fit for today.
So these proposals are urban extensions. They're not really new towns, are they?
Some of them are.
Some of them are standalone.
Yes,
Not
I mentioned
expanded.
Adlington.
I'm not familiar with the ones outside London, so
Yeah,
I do
okay,
apologise.
sorry, yes, yes.
I'm not familiar
yes,
with
the
ones
London
outside.
ones certainly are, I would say, peri-urban densification or extensions.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not really a new town.
Yeah.
Not really a new town then.
New settlements, new towns.
I
Well, we're
fully
calling it
support
new
what's
towns.
happening at Thamesmead, may I say. I absolutely see the point. It's all on brown belt land. It's great. Absolutely so. But the other extension up to Cruise Hill is just an urban expansion. Urban sprawl, isn't it?
No, I would not define it as urban sprawl. I would say that if you look at the placemaking principles chapter in the new towns, there's an absolute commitment from the task force side that any of these places that are picked and developed as new towns will fulfill the intention of the placemaking principles, which is have a distinct identity, have high quality, be fairly dense around transport infrastructure, well-connected, multi-generational in terms of housing offer, affordable. So I guess if you add that all up, there is an opportunity to develop a distinct sort of, I would say, a town within a city.
Okay, my final question on this, I thank you for your indulgence. When do we expect the legislation to come forward to redefine what a new town is?
I'm not sure what the timeline of government is, but I know that they plan to come back with a full response in spring or summer of this year, and I'm hoping any timeline for any new legislation will be announced at that time.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
So remember, Lord Bailey.
Just a very short question. Do you think we should rename them? I think this new town label is causing confusion. Can't we just come up with a new name? It's a new thing.
Because the new thing is urban sprawl.
I mean, I suppose we could. The new towns legislation is still active.
Yes,
and so, we want to use that legislation and build on it for this generation of new towns. I mean, certainly we can brand it something else.
Yeah, I think I'm talking about the branding because I don't have a problem with an urban extension. I personally can see that as a new town. London is a place made up of 50-odd towns that sort of merged together. But other people are having a problem with that. I don't want to labour the point, but somebody needs to come with a funky... I mean, we had garden cities, we had new towns. Just get another label. I just think it'll make it easier for the public to understand what's happening and accept it.
And then my question is to Kate. What benefit is there for the designation of a site as a new town for somewhere like Thamesmead Waterfront?
So I think for the project, it is around stability through potential different economic and political cycles. If you have that kind of overarching new town status, potential access to alternative means of financing and funding. That's what we've been exploring with lots of different groups around that. It's also bringing together different governmental organisations to come together and really focus on bringing forward and accelerating delivery in a place where it's got this potential. And for us, we have such ambitions for Thamesmead Waterfront. We feel that having a new town designation would enable us to deliver all those ambitions.
Thank you. Assemblymember Garbett.
Thank you. Just to follow up on the theme of that Assemblymember Boff has started, I do share his concerns about making sure we hear the nature concerns within this investigation. I'm interested in the London focus around the fact that there's a green belt review happening in London that's going to put forward its recommendations in line with the London plan that comes out in May. How does that dovetail with the kind of developments of the new towns currently?
So I would say that there's lots of such initiatives going on all over the country. So when the task force was doing its work, there were sort of similar studies happening in many areas. So we took the view that we would look at the sites that had been put forward by sponsors, pick the right number of sites, and we were asked to pick a sufficient number of sites which the government could then choose from. And at the moment, as I understand it, MHCLG and Homes England are doing a whole lot of due diligence on all of these sites, including a strategic environment assessment. And it will be on the basis of the findings from that work that they will finally pick and announce a shortlist. So I'm expecting studies in the London sites that are happening, such as the one you mentioned, will be considered during that study, because we submitted our report back in September. And it's going to be several months before the government's announcing. And that period is basically to look at some of these things, visit the sites, speak to some of the stakeholders, and really understand the concerns and opportunities a little bit better before making the final announcement.
Great, because I think that's what Assemblymember Boff and I are raising, just the concerns around timing with some of the legislation not being in place, and also from a London context, not having the outputs of the review and the London plan before we're discussing the shape and form. Because I guess the strategic environmental assessment might do some of this, but what are the protections of the new PAM programme for defending nature and incorporating nature into their design?
It was discussed at great length. I think it's absolutely important. I mean, some of the placemaking principles, including the principles of environmental sustainability and so on, make it absolutely clear that we need to work with nature. I appreciate we have some locations where greenbelt release may be required, but I think we should absolutely support a new model of development where we're building with nature. I mean, Enfield has some wonderful nature recovery programs, and there was absolutely no question that we would need to integrate with that. So I expect if you read the placemaking principles, they're quite high level, but they are quite non-negotiable from the point of view of the task force. So if anyone accepts the new town's designation and sets up a delivery model, they'll have to not only adopt those principles, but flesh them out a little bit on what it means for that particular site. The reason we didn't go into detail was there are some sites which are much more green and rural, and there are others which are much more urban. So exactly what that would mean would differ from place to place, but whichever delivery authority gets set up will be responsible for fleshing those out. But the principle of protection for nature is absolutely embedded there.
And do you work with environmental organisations, people like CPRE and other kind of national groups that, want to see the kind of protection of the greenbelt and other kind of?
Yes, I mean there was during the year that the task force was doing its work, we had a huge amount of engagement with all the professional bodies, National England, all the statutory bodies, various industry organizations, and so on. So their input has been sought, but of course, more work needs to be done. And once any of these get kicked off, there'll be yet more work before some of those principles and guidelines are set. We've also recommended that when the new towns are, when the delivery body is set up, they will need to develop and adopt some design principles, and it's at that point when much more community engagement will come in, and those principles will be set. It could be different for different places. It's not a one-size-fits-all.
That's good to hear, because I think, what I'm kind of feeling is that some of this is moving at pace before we've agreed some of the kind of protections that we need for nature and some of the other things, but that can be something that we can pick up in our investigation. Thank you.
Assembly Member Lord Bailey.
I'm going to start with Partha Sarathi. The New Towns Task Force recommended development corporations as the default delivery model for new towns. Why is that the case? And in the case of London, is that a development corporation or is it a mayoral development corporation?
So I think the development corporation was seen as a delivery authority with the strongest powers to have a focus on delivering these new towns. That's how the previous rounds of new towns were delivered. It was also seen as an effective vehicle for government to invest in infrastructure early on and to be able to recapture value, as some of the old towns did. Now, the exact model of the development corporation, whether it's centrally led or locally led or mayorally led, we didn't specify what that would be. I think there was a clear opening that depending on where it is, it could be any of the above. We've also left open the opportunity for other types of delivery models that, such as JVs or land partnerships, which have the same teeth as a development corporation. So that was seen as a good model, and any other delivery model should be benchmarked against what a development corporation can achieve. Your specific question on mayoral development corporation, absolutely. I think London has a very good track record of mayoral development corporations, and in the London case, that could be a possible delivery vehicle, but there could be other models as well.
There's a certain amount of politics wrapped up in that, I'd imagine. Ms. Greenway, you've talked about a development light you'd like to see, in the new town that you could possibly develop. What does that mean? Would you like the mayor's corporation to be is that what you see as development light, or do you have a different corporation light in mind?
So for Thamesmead Waterfront, obviously we recognise that development corporations are the delivery model that the government potentially would prefer for new towns, but we've actually said you have to look at each project, each site, and actually adapt to what is already in there. So we already have a JV in place, a delivery model in place. We have a partnership already around the DLR extension to Thamesmead with the GLA, with Homes England, with others. So how can we build on that as opposed to bringing in a new corporation that potentially may take a couple of years to set up? So we're looking at all sorts of different options about is there different mechanisms that we could bring forward delivery at Thamesmead Waterfront, because we have the commitment now around the DLR extension, and we're keen to get on with delivery. So how can we use the new town's status to bring that forward and not actually delay any development coming forward?
So to me, it sounds like there's a certain amount of flexibility in what the New Towns Task Force came up with. So maybe you can go back with quite a strong offer and say, here's who we are and here's how we'd like to do that. I wonder what that would look like. And couldn't you just form a development corporation and have the board members of with the members you already have in your JV, etc., etc.? Because it might give you different statutory powers. I'm asking.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have been discussing this. We are a private joint venture, set up as a corporate joint venture at the moment. But there could be a standalone board that sits alongside that joint venture, and there could be potential equity positions between those different partners. And we are open to look at all options and what would be best in terms of just delivering the project. And as part of the process we're going through around the gap analysis work, the SEA, we are talking to other partners around what is the best delivery mechanism for this site. And how can we bring forward delivery? We don't have those answers at the moment, but before spring, when the final ones are announced, is when we hope to have that answer.
I think we on this committee would be interested in those answers, because an outsider think don't disturb them, they're halfway there. But I can see how the government are wrestling with making sure the right model's built. And I think one of the advantages of your model is stewardship. We'll come on to that later, my colleagues asked, but it feels like you're going to be there for a while, which I think is important. Just to quickly go to the TfL, whatever the model is, in the context of London, surely you'll need to be involved because you have to give us transport.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I think the first thing to say is that certainly on the Thamesmead example, there's been great partnership working over a long period of time, which is why it's in the position it is. And in terms of a potential development corporation, we don't necessarily think that it's required at Thamesmead, but it is something to explore. But TfL is kind of committed to working in partnership, and there will be agreements in due course between us, the GLA, and the landowners there. I think the question probably is a bit different in Enfield, where there's a lot of statutory powers which would be needed to deliver that. Right. And I think there's probably much more of a case for some form of development corporation in Enfield.
That's interesting. Thank you for the answer. Look, the contract for the GLI extension has gone out for tender. It's £1.62 billion.
Assemblymember, I think we might have had a supplementary in between from Assemblymember Garbutt. Just before you progress on to transport.
In my defence, she didn't realise either.
No, I didn't realise you'd gone on to the next one, but yeah, thank you.
We've got a contentious chair, isn't it?
This is just a point of just general interest in the structure of development corporations. And I know you've put the case forward around Thamesmead, but just generally, what's the argument for councils not being given the kind of powers and the responsibility and the funding to deliver the changes within their local areas? Will it always go to a development corporation, or would a council be considered as being able to do this themselves?
I can just take one crack. I mean, there are some regulated legislative powers that development corporations have. For example, they can borrow money, they can CPO land, they can adopt planning powers like the Mayoral Development Corporation. So there are a number of things which are, I guess, additional powers to what councils typically have. And also, in some ways, a development corporation, because it is a dedicated body focused on delivering one project, it can adopt a long-term master plan, make that into a statutory plan, and sort of be the stewards of that for a long period of time. It also, one of the things we heard from investors, including pension corporations and things like that, is what they had lots of money to invest, but what they valued was some certainty that there would be some kind of a delivery vehicle that transcends sort of political change. And so development corporations might be able to provide that sort of long-term certainty. So there were a number of reasons why it is a more robust delivery vehicle. But we did say in the report that no matter what the form of the development corporation, whether it's central or mayoral, the council representation must be there in the board, because none of the places really work without local ownership, and so it would be essential to have some kind of representation. But that's the reason for the
it's just interesting, and I haven't spoken to councils, and I don't know the view of kind of Enfield on this, but it's just, for me, I just think, when we know that councils are so locally rooted, and these are such a huge opportunity to kind of invest in councils, but also related, how do we ensure that they, from a kind of anchor institution perspective, how do we ensure that whatever body they are, they're really focused on kind of local employment and kind of, making sure, I don't know if that's written into...
Some of the London examples are good examples of that. So what I didn't mention was the Mayoral Development Corporation. For example, London Legacy Development Corporation actually spans 4 councils. So in some ways, one of the advantages of it is it works cross-council. And there's representation from all the councils. So outside of London, I mean, I know this is about London, but outside of London, there was lots of discussion about combined mayoral authorities being able to take that responsibility, for example. So I think there are many models you can use, but the development corporation, the pure model, actually has some powers that provide a good benchmark for whatever you decide.
That's really interesting. Thank you, Chair.
Just before I go back to Assemblymember Lord Bailey, I think we might have an intervention from Assemblymember Boff as well. Okay, we just heard from Sonia about the powers development corporations have and their ability to survive political cycles and change. Without that development corporation model for Thamesmead, are you confident in the planning powers that you might get from the council? Are you confident in that relationship and that it can sustain what will be quite a long build?
Yeah, we've been working with Greenwich for a number of years on the Thamesmead waterfront site. So they've just published their draft local plan, which Thamesmead waterfront is part of that, and it supports our vision, supports our delivery programme. And we have a very good relationship with them, and we've always supported the fact that they should keep hold of the planning powers, again with the GLA as well, around the OAPF and the planning frameworks that are already placed for Thamesmead. So in terms of a development corporation potentially for Thamesmead Waterfront, I think the benefit would probably be more around delivery and investment rather than planning powers, because they are there at the moment to bring it forward.
Thank you. Assemblymember Boff.
It's just very quickly on this accountability of the development corporations. Of course, the original new towns, they just set up new councils, didn't they? Didn't they? But I think they just set up new council, Peterborough.
I mean, eventually, like for example, I guess Milton Keynes was a development corporation to start with, but eventually it transferred to a council. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's no there's no expiry date on these development corporations, is there?
They will. I think I'm not an expert on it, but the Milton Keynes Development Corporation did expire at some point. So I think you can put an expiry date.
They didn't know beforehand. And just one other thing that you mentioned earlier, you talked about selecting greenbelt sites that were grey belt. If you were just selecting grey belt, how did we end up with a new town proposal at Cruise Hill that is going to be built on parkland?
To be honest, I think at the moment the red line is quite wide, and the next step will be to figure out where exactly you build, because many of these new towns will have parkland within it. It's not going to be completely built out. So I think that master planning of where the built sites will be and where the open space will be is not determined yet.
So the red line incorporates.
Yeah, it's a wider red line.
Parkland.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Assemblymember Lord Bailey.
This is to David. The contract for the DLR extension has gone out to tender. It's 1.62 billion. How will that be paid for?
Thank you. So, I know that was written in the contract document. The latest estimate that we're working to is 1.5 billion still. And obviously, it's at a relatively early stage of development. We've still got to go through the Transport Works Act process. But we are working to that, and that's based on the current benchmarking approach. In terms of paying for it, we have been working with government over a period of time and have got to a kind of outline of an understanding that London will borrow the money to finance the DLR extension, and that'll be between the TfL and the GLA. And the repayment of that will be largely based on incremental revenues associated with either the DLR extension or the housing that are coming forward. So, for example, fare revenues from the new passengers, but also some of the kind of planning gain, the discussion about potential community infrastructure levy, business rates uplift, and other types of sources of funding. There is also a plan for government to provide funding over time to support the repayment of the DLR extension.
But that's quite good to see there's a conversation about varied ways of paying, but that's very early stage, or is that what you're saying with all these conversations?
There's a kind of outline discussions with government on that broad principle. We're working through the details now, and there does need to be a kind of final agreement with government. But there's been a lot of work done on the overarching approach to funding, and I'm sure that at the right time that the Assembly will be updated on the kind of details of that. But at the moment, that's the broad outline, that most of the repayment will be covered by the revenues associated with the DLR extension and the housing, and then this government support over time.
Okay, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblymember Baker.
Thanks, Chair. So my first couple of questions, possibly more than two, will be to David. Thanks. Firstly, the DLR extension to Thamesmead again. In our previous meeting, it was suggested that extending the DLR past Thamesmead to stops further into Bexley may be necessary to make it a more commercially viable proposition. Does that stack up with TfL's analysis?
Thank you very much. So we have looked at onward extensions as part of the work that we did to come up with the proposal to the DLR extension. Extending to Abbey Wood is very difficult because of the kind of the infrastructure requirements is just very challenging to do. Belvedere could be possible, and we did look at that. Our view and the work to date shows that it would come with much higher costs and fewer benefits, particularly in terms of unlocking housing, and it wouldn't be a better financial position for TfL. So I did see the report of what the commentary was saying about scale, but our view at the moment with the two stations, the new development at Beckton Riverside and Thamesmead, that's a viable proposition and is the best thing that we should be planning for at the moment.
Thanks. I mean, obviously, at the moment, the extensions sort of very heavily based around the ability to provide new homes. Obviously, in general, transport extensions are good for the people who live in those places. So it would be, you know, on that basis, it would be great if it was possible. So in terms of if in the future there was a decision to extend further to Belvedere, how much more would it cost doing it then than it would be doing it now? Does that make sense?
It does. I don't have the exact figures for the incremental cost, and certainly not that comparison. I think that what I think, absolutely, there would be connectivity benefits potentially, and some people would benefit. I think that it's also, but in terms of the overall value for money case, it would be poorer and less affordable than what we're planning for now. The extension is being designed on the basis that it wouldn't preclude that further extension, and that's very important. And you know, we've talked to Bexley Council about that as well. So the door does remain open in the future, but at the moment there are no plans to extend it further.
Understood. Thank you. And then moving, no, apologies. So on both Thamesmead and Cruise Hill and Chase Park, so the designation, the Newtown designation, does that give any benefit to TfL in terms of delivering both the DLR extension and the improvements that might come through devolution? Does that strengthen your hand in any way to deliver those improvements?
I think the Newtown opportunity has been a real focus point and has really helped, you know, progress, in my view, the case for both the DLR extension, although it was incredibly strong already, but also the devolution of Great Northern, and particularly the enhancements that we'd want to see on that Great Northern service, the Great Northern Inner Service, to serve that route much better. So I think it's fair to say that there's, you know, I don't think that the Newtown would particularly change the Thamesmead proposal for the DLR, but hopefully it will see acceleration and potentially a better financial outturn for us in terms of if the housing is built more quickly, that more fares paid, and it's a better position. I think in terms of Cruise Hill, I think that the new town brings with it the opportunity for a lot more housing along that corridor, and that probably allows in the longer term for better services. So we are looking at what we would do kind of day one when the service opens, how we would improve services on Great Northern Inners. Yeah. But over time, if the new town is built out, we would look further about how we could improve services to keep up with the housing delivery and support that wider position. So I think that is a difference.
So is it fair to say that what you're saying is the new town designation itself doesn't give any particular mechanism to deliver them, but it does strengthen the case to have those upgrades overall if there's going to be more people using them? Is that fair?
I think that's right at the moment,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
There could be something in terms of the potential for further land value capture, and that might be something that we would explore further, perhaps around the Great Northern proposal, okay. Because it's less advanced, really, the financing and the funding case for that project.
Fantastic, thank you. And specifically coming on to Cruise Hill and potential devolution, it's obviously, I mean, it was great that it was identified that there's good connectivity, but it is a small station. It doesn't have a huge amount of services for a London station. So how much do you think that, what's the assessment of how much the services would need to increase to accommodate a new town of up to 21,000 homes?
Thank you very much. So I've got that.
Got
I think that we're looking initially at running additional services to create 4 trains per hour in the off-peak on both branches. So I think that would bring it up closer to kind of 6 to 8 trains per hour off-peak to serve Cruise Hill. And we think that that would support initial levels of development. But there would need to be, if the full build-out was planned and the new town went ahead, over time we would need to look beyond that. And we have done some indicative work, but I think that that's partly to do with the work that's happening at the moment, looking at that Cruise Hill proposal, what it looks like, where the homes will be built, and then we're going to do some assessment on what that would mean for the demand on the line.
Thanks. And is there anything that the government could do differently in the way the new town designations are being done to further accelerate the delivery of the transport upgrades?
I would say that it's been great that the government have put transport at the heart of their proposals for new towns. It's very welcome, and they've been really open to working with Transport for London about those proposals at both Thamesmead and Cruise Hill. So I think kind of maintaining that focus, continuing to work with us on the potential devolution of the Great Northern Line, and I think that, you know, seeing through those principles that they've put in place around the placemaking principles about high connected, well-connected, sustainable locations, that's really important.
Fantastic, thank you. And coming to you, Kate, so we've heard really strongly, I mean, we heard it over and over again in the last panel, and I suspect you agree, that the need to build infrastructure first, for it to be in place, transport infrastructure, particularly in new towns. So I think we're looking at potentially the DLR trains being operational in 2033. Are you expecting new residents in Thamesmead Waterfront before then?
Yes, so for us to bring forward the first phase of development, it's all around certainty of delivery. Yeah. So obviously we're working closely with TfL around the programme for the submission of the TWAO, and we will look to kind of twin track our planning process, so that even before the DLR is open, there'll be the first residents living within Thamesmead Waterfront. Obviously that's dependent on planning. As you have with many developments have happened along the Elizabeth line. So they, with the certainty that they had, they built the housing on the fact that it was going to be there. So people move in knowing that you're going to have a station there. So you can plan ahead once you've got that planning certainty around that it is actually going to be delivered.
It's slightly different on the Elizabeth line, because obviously those were substantial upgrades to the service and but we're talking an entirely new station.
Well, at Abbey Wood, it was an entirely new.
Apologies, that was incredibly North London of me. I apologise. I'm a London-wide member. I should have been careful about that. I was thinking about along East London. Yeah, but mostly those places and, you know, knock-on effect and new homes were, So there is a real. It's not a danger, I'd say, but there's obviously an issue in terms of making sure that is coming, and what do we do? And that's how I'm going to come to you, David. What do we do to mitigate that if there are people living there before the actual station is operational?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think this is also a kind of good news story in that the government have worked with the GLA and TfL to fund new bus infrastructure and walking and cycling infrastructure in the Thamesmead area. And as part of that, we also have just launched the Superloop 11 service, which serves Thamesmead, goes to Abbey Wood, goes to Woolwich. And we think, and the initial assessment says, essentially, that that can support the first phase of delivery, that will have a strategic connection, quick connection into the Elizabeth line, which will support a certain level of delivery of housing. So I think that, yes, the DLR may come after the first residents, but they will have that from day one to support them and get them to work and all the things they need to access.
Okay, that's fine. And just while we're on the subject of buses, what stage does the planning of local buses come? So obviously the Superloop's there, and that can be sort of flexed to the needs of however many people you've got there. But in terms of the community as it grows, when do you plan in what local bus services within developments are going to be needed?
So I think to an extent, some of it has been done as part of the Superloop proposal, because it is if you look, there was a consultation that ended in January for local walking, cycling and bus improvements, and that has considered it to an extent. I think that as the JV come forward with their plans and their phasing, that will be the opportunity to really get into the detail about what any potential service changes that are needed. But the town centre and that connection is there for buses, and we'll consider it as they come forward with their plan.
But obviously, if you've got, I mean, I don't think thousands of more people, you're going to need more local buses. You just are, aren't you? So. But that will be done as the specific plans come forward.
I think that there is an uplift associated with the Superloop, so we think the first phase should be catered for in this, but as it comes forward, we'll look at that.
I'm really sorry to labour the point, but the Superloop is not. The Superloop is an express bus. You obviously know this, but I just want to say this: the Superloop is an express bus. It gets to people to, from one point to another. I'm talking about local buses going to other places, moving around communities to local amenities, and I'm specifically asking when that comes in the planning phases.
Yeah, okay. So essentially, when the planning application comes in and they discuss on pre-applications, we'll look at the bus proposals at that stage.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. David, your answers, you talked about the use of land value capture. I was just wondering how much of the funding you think, even roughly, would be coming from land value capture versus things like fair revenue?
So forms of land value capture available to us are somewhat limited, but we have looked at all the ones that are available as part of the DLR extension proposal, and so the majority of it the majority of the extension will be repaid on the basis of the incremental revenues. So some of that is fares, which is not really land value capture, but it is coming from the new developments. But the other proportion around community infrastructure levy, business rates, potential Section 106 also make a significant contribution to the funding package. We're still looking at how much and the details of that, but it is a significant proportion of the overall repayment.
Thank you. You mentioned housing as well as part of the potential funding in relation as well, in addition to business rates and other things. What did you mean exactly by housing?
I guess what I'm saying is that as some of those sources come when the housing's built, so for example, if there's new commercial properties, they would pay business rates. If there's new homes built, then there might be Section 106 or community infrastructure levy. So that was what I was talking about. There has been a wider look across, and we have worked very closely with Peabody and others about what's potential, but there are other infrastructure requirements to get the homes built at Thamesmead. So there is a big ask in terms of overall infrastructure, and the DLR is obviously a big part of that.
Because there was a recent report that Business London put out, and this is part of the reason I wanted to ask the question about housing, because they advocated the mayor having the powers around stamp duty or having some revenues from stamp duty along transport corridors where the GLA and TfL have made significant investments. Do you think that would be a potential funding stream, not necessarily this project, but just more generally that could be deployed?
I think there are lots of things that could be looked at, and I know there have been several studies into this, and also it's been looked at by parliamentary committees. I think that on stamp duty, there definitely is potential for something like this. I think, though, that government hasn't devolved stamp duty in this way, and there would probably be a good case to look at that as a broader question rather than just at Thamesmead. I think the other thing to bear in mind is that stamp duty is it's not a regular source of funding, so there are some drawbacks to it as well.
Thank you. And Kate, in Peabody's written evidence to the Lords Built Environment Committee, it stated that new towns could be an opportunity to trial new methods for land value capture or look again at the development tariff approach that new towns like Milton Keynes took. Could you just elaborate on this a bit and how you think land value capture could be potentially best used at London's new towns?
I think it's just interesting to look at how potential other developments have done it across the UK, and the different mechanisms that you could bring in, and using all of those as a potential option. The issue with Thamesmead is that it's a very low value location as it is already, so land value capture is quite limited for this new town, but there could be potential other ways that if we do have some funding up front to deliver infrastructure, then it's recaptured following that over the years. So there's various different mechanisms that we are looking at the moment. I can't specifically say which ones at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you. And Soumya, do you have any thoughts when it comes to land value capture and the potential financing of the transport infrastructure that's needed to serve these new towns?
Sorry. I wouldn't be able to speak to all the various ways in which you can capture. I mean, obviously, there are many models, Crossrail did in a particular way. what we did find was that there is more opportunity to capture value where land values are higher anyway. So we've got some, in the broader national program, there are some sites, some possible locations in the southeast and Oxfam. There's a better chance to do that than elsewhere. I'll just come back to the issue of development cooperation. One of the things a development cooperation can help facilitate is early investment from money, loans, or funding from government and other sources to put into infrastructure, not just transport, possibly other forms of infrastructure. One of the forms that is mentioned in the report is social infrastructure, which typically we have found always lags behind any development. So, so all I will say is that we've encouraged all forms of land value capture to be explored, which is why we think it's very important early on to consolidate land ownership. Ideally, if it's with the public sector or with the development corporation, they'll be able to recoup the benefit of that land value capture no matter how it's done. But that, so I'll just leave it at that in terms of our high-level principles.
Thank you. Assemblymember Boff.
I was just wondering, Ms. Greenaway, have we taken lessons from the previous regenerations that we have done? Because it's been patchy. I live in a regeneration, basically in Barking Riverside, and when I bought the house, it was cheap as chips. Really was the best deal in London at the time because nobody wanted to go there. But that in itself is a problem, and it's taken. If you take, for example, Beam Park is still waiting for their station. Barking Riverside waited much longer than they were told for their extension. Are you confident that you're going to be able to get that stuff in order to provide that catalyst for the redevelopment? I mean, I wish you well in Thamesmead. It needs it so badly. But is everything really in place, or just a promise like Beam Park, like Barking Riverside and all that?
I mean, obviously, Thamesmead was one of the original new towns from the 1960s, and one of the reasons how it's developed is because the housing came before the infrastructure. So we are learning from that, and actually you need to bring the infrastructure in first, or have a commitment around the infrastructure before you bring the housing, the facilities, the social infrastructure. So that we're learning a lot of lessons for what's happened in Thamesmead. Obviously, there's a lot of excellent stuff that's been delivered in Thamesmead over the years, but also learning how it's developed. And Thamesmead Waterfront itself was a part of the original master plan for Thamesmead, linking with the existing town centre. But it didn't come forward as a scheme because the transport infrastructure that was promised was never delivered. So that's why for us as a joint venture, we've always had this incremental delivery programme where we have the certainty around transport infrastructure. We either can then come forward with our proposals. So now we have got that level of certainty around the DLR extension. We feel confident enough to bring forward our vision, our master plan, and to line up the delivery programmes.
And other parts of the infrastructure as well. You should have a word with Matt Carpin, who's now over at Old Oak Common Development Corporation. He was spent a long time at Barking Riverside, and the amount of interventions that have to take place at an early stage when you haven't got the footfall is very expensive. It's very, very expensive just to get that community working. It means subsidised activities, subsidised rents, and all the rest of it. And I hope as long as you're prepared for quite a few years of emptying money into the project, which you won't see for some time.
And I think this is where one of the advantages of becoming a new town is that the early phases of any new scheme coming forward like this, an area of where there is a lot of infrastructure required and low values, is that you can have support from all across government to bring forward those early phases where there are substantial viability challenges. But because you're a new town, you have that governance in place, then you can recoup that value later on down the line for later phases where you have that value generation.
Assemblymember Lord Bailey.
Do you think this blanket need for 40% social housing will work? You yourself talked about the differing land values. So in parts of London that may well be possible, but many parts of this country, including London, that is a pipe dream. So do you think that blanket call was useful or not when you were looking at these sites?
We did quite a lot of modelling on how much subsidy different locations would need if they were to fulfill the 40% criteria, with, by the way, 20% of that, half of that to be social housing. And it was very clear that the higher land value places may not need much subsidy, but they still would. And the lower land value places in some other locations in the country would need a lot more subsidy. But that's where, I mean, the government was very clear with us that they would, this was a flagship commitment from them. And at some point during our work, they announced the 39 billion fund for affordable housing. So it looks like there is, and the announcement of the National Housing Bank. So it looks like there's funding from government that new town locations can seek in order to achieve that. And so we decided to adopt this as a non-negotiable principle in our placemaking principles. So.
And what effect does that have on other infrastructure subsidies that are going to be needed, transport, everything else? Is that 40% for housing and subsidy a separate piece of thing?
Yes, my understanding is there's a 39 billion government fund for affordable housing that locations can apply for. And the National Housing Bank, and that is earmarked for affordable housing.
But that's for all affordable
housing. Yes, it's for all affordable housing.
So not just for new towns that have to.
No, it's for all affordable housing. Okay. But it's new towns will have some dibs on that. But that is for, and the other infrastructure will also need subsidies and an investment. And we did talk about where that might come from. It could be funding from government, and of course there's huge fiscal pressures for government as well, so they may not be able to obviously fund everything, but they could through loans and other things. And part of the story also was there seemed to be a huge amount of interest from other investors, particularly organizations like the Pensions Insurance Corporation, but they needed a level of sort of ownership from government, some long-term certainty. And so if we get the bones in place, there could be investment unlocked for early investment in infrastructure from not just government, but from private and pension organizations as well.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And Somi, you mentioned there the 39 billion the government have put in for social and affordable housing over the next 10 years. In terms of London's element of that will be distributed through the mayor, and he's getting 11.7 billion of that 39 billion. I know you won't know this for certain, but would your prediction be that for the new towns in London, they would have to apply to the mayor's scheme for the funding rather than there being a separate government scheme specifically for new towns?
I expect so. I don't know for sure, but London does have the GLA, the London plan, so one has to work through that construct. So that would be my understanding.
Thank you. Assemblymember Garbutt.
Thank you. Just on transport, I was just going to ask about what lessons the new towns can draw on to ensure that communities support walking and cycling infrastructure, as well as public transport. So I don't know if there's any lessons or if that's, how that's being considered as part of the new town development.
I mean, there's no doubt about it. Walkable, cyclable places, active transport places are just better places. And the placemaking principles have a number of different recommendations that support that broader sort of walkable settlement idea. So we've said that all places should look at ambitious density. We deliberately use that word because I think we need to build slightly more dense. Doesn't mean the same density everywhere. It would depend on location. But the reason for that is it supports investment in public transport. It makes places more walkable and cyclable. We've talked about a principle that's around healthy places, and that is part of that is enabling active travel. And so, yes, I mean, it's all over the place. I think any community that we build absolutely needs to be built around stations and be walkable and cyclable. I will say there's a transport connectivity principle which talks about two elements. One is new towns are successful if they have public transport or train connectivity with other places of employment and economics. So they are part of a wider sub-region and they need to be connected. So that's one element. And the other element is within the settlements and towns themselves, they should be highly connected to each other. So you don't need a car to go about your daily life. So both those criteria must be fulfilled, we feel, for a successful new town.
And so obviously both of the new town locations connect into places that have tried to increase walking and cycling previously, so Enfield and Thamesmead. So would a requirement for the successful new town to ensure that they're on cycleways and connect with the rest of London, should it not be that they require for every, from the start, that every home should be within 400 metres of a strategic cycle route, which is within the London plan? So is that built in as a requirement into the new towns?
We broadly looked at places which would be able to achieve that. We didn't go to that level of detail, but I would very much support enhancing the placemaking principles to actually have recommendations and principles such as that when the right time comes.
Great. And maybe for you, David, would investment in walking and cycling infrastructure benefit the public transport connections like the DLR, Elizabeth Line, and Overground? Would that help as well?
So I think yes. I mean, I think that we see kind of sustainable development linked to transport as being essentially requiring that good public transport source, but also that local walking and cycling network, because the two things contribute to people being able to live lives without using their car on a daily basis or without access to a car. So that's really important. I can talk perhaps more to the Thamesmead example, but there's been a series of pieces of work done over time, including an opportunity area planning framework for the area, which looked at a local connection study as well, that have looked at these issues at a strategic level to inform the work that the developers and the kind of JV would do in due course. So I think that model does include thinking about walking and cycling effectively.
Anything from you, Kate, on walking and cycling?
Yeah, I think so. We have a strategic master plan for Thamesmead Waterfront, which kind of outlines our vision. But going forward, we will absolutely need to get into the detail of all these issues, particularly with Greenwich. And one of the advantages potentially of becoming a new town is that there could be like a supplementary planning document that comes along, or supplementary planning advice that captures all of these kind of local transit connections and really works with all partners to ensure we are designing and delivering the place that we want to. So that's a real benefit, I feel, around the new town's potential.
Great. Shall I go on to housing? Yeah, great. I guess what we heard from the first panel was all around kind of who gets consulted and who kind of benefits from the new towns, because obviously they're pitched as kind of London's new towns, but obviously also exist within a local area and a local community. So I guess the proposal, maybe for Swami, how should Londoners be consulted on the new town sites? Oh, Mike, yeah.
One of the placemaking principles is about community engagement. And at the moment, it's been a slightly more of a top-down enterprise where consultations with GLA councils rather than people in those areas. But absolutely, once these places are on the list or not, and in any case, even if they are not designated new towns, they'll likely go ahead, there needs to be engagement with the local community. Most of these places, very few, in the broader New Towns program, very few are completely standalone. Almost all of them have existing communities in it, around it, and so on. So I think there needs to be a well-structured form of sort of co-design principles applied to what this place might look like. I also personally feel that often the high-level outcomes of these new towns are talked about, such as housing and economic development and transport infrastructure, but actually benefits for the local community are not talked about. Often they come much later. What we are saying is you need to bring them earlier, and part of the narrative of this new town must be to engage people on what's the benefit to them in the near term rather than a theoretical, distant vision of a new town that's being delivered. We expect most of these new towns, the success will be based on they being great places that people will choose to live in and choose to move to and choose to continue to live in. And I think we just need to have that conversation with people and build it bottom up. And that would be the next step once we know which places are going ahead as new towns or even going ahead without the new towns designation.
Great, that's really interesting. And is there a balance between the people who kind of in the local area with people who are kind of interested in what's happening, I guess? Do you define kind of those interests? And also related, are there any really good examples from the new towns anywhere of where they've done that really well, like they've really kind of listened to the community to get those benefits and understand that?
I in my professional life, I am a master planner for very large communities. Many of them where new people are coming in, and often the consultation sometimes is limited to people living there, and they bring one perspective. We've used techniques such as focus groups in terms of who might the future population be and what might they need. How towns might change if new populations come in. So I think there are many techniques that you can use to figure out what would be acceptable to local people, what would be attractive to new people, how might they be able to sort of coexist and create this new place. One of the things we have said for new towns, no matter where they are, they need to be balanced communities. And by that we mean multi-generational, so we've gone to great lengths to say the types of housing must be varied. We think they should be houses and apartments and flats. They should be rental homes. They should be homes for older people. They need to be family homes, because one of the success factors of new towns, not just in the UK, but we looked at broader parts of Europe and other places, is these are real places. They are not places that are built for one demographic alone. And so I think we need to use a bunch of techniques in getting that perspective, not just from people who are already there. I think that's very, very important, obviously, but also trying to imagine what a balanced community might look like.
That's really interesting, because my next question was going to be around the why the 40% and why 50% of the 40% being social homes, and actually was going to exactly ask that, because I'm chair of the Housing Committee and we recently made a recommendation to the Mayor about how he needs to be more kind of make more kind of interventions to get the accessible homes and the family homes that we need. So it was interesting you hearing that you are making those kind of stipulations to make sure that you're getting all those different types of tenures. So yeah, I guess it's because we also heard in the first panel that they'd like to see some of the people presenting were saying they'd maybe like to see that as a more ambitious target around the kind of opportunity to address the very sharpest end of the housing crisis around those council and social homes. So yeah, just interested in how you've come up with that 40% and then 50. Well, how that's been decided.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the 40% was a number that was already in the picture when government announced the New Towns programme. And so we did query it. We thought, is it affordable enough? Should it be higher? Should it be lower? And so with all the testing, we said we wanted to enthusiastically support that initial government ambition. And then we also looked at how that might break down, how much of it. And so we thought we should go pretty ambitious, so half of it social. And partly it was because affordability is such an issue. I mean, that we just felt that even if we should make it very clear that this is the ambition. It will be expensive, and be very clear that it would need subsidy, it would need funding, it would need effort, and we can't just leave it to the market. We looked at current sort of large schemes that are delivered purely privately, and we know that the business model doesn't support more than, say, 8,000 homes coming together in one go. And, we also looked at the periods where the pace of housing delivery was similar to what we need now, which is 300,000 a year. And it was when a number of different actors were actually building. It wasn't just the house builders, it was councils were building it, SMEs were building it, housing associations were building it. And so we want to facilitate a number of different actors building housing. And if you and hopefully the split that we've envisioned and noted in the report will allow more than the usual suspects to actually build housing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say, and like some of the Shelter and others in the first panel were talking about just making sure that we get as much affordable homes as possible, because obviously even with that 40%, it means 60% are unaffordable, and obviously 20% are going to be council homes. So it just means, I just think as many mechanisms as we can use to push it, it would be, just to maximise that. Kate, just briefly on the allocation of the social and affordable homes that will come through on the Thamesmead site. Have you had conversations with Greenwich about how some of those would be allocated, or
Not at this stage. No, it's still an early stage. Obviously, as Peabody, our ambitions is to deliver as much affordable housing as possible. Thamesmead is an affordable location already, even with the regeneration that's happening through South Thamesmead. That is still an affordable location. But at this stage, we haven't had conversations with Greenwich around allocations or anything like that. So that will come as part of the detailed discussions as we go through the planning process.
Interesting. Well, I'm sure we'll keep a close eye on that. And then one quick last question, probably for Samaya. Is there any conversations about like community land trusts or like different forms of ownership? Do you just touch on that, please? Thanks.
Yes, it's specifically mentioned in our report. We thought that another advantage of a development corporation or a robust delivery body is it can provide that umbrella master developer role and allow SMEs and community land trusts and self-build and many of these things which we've all been talking about for years to actually plug into a framework that they can manage. So yes, absolutely.
And does that just exist on what comes forward, and it will just be interrogated to see if we can maximise those kind of elements? Is that how it works?
Yes, but I would hope that early on, because the principles suggest that we need to build a variety of houses, that there would be a kind of a strategy for build out. So we're not just going to say, let's see what comes and build it, but maybe different pieces of land allocated for different types of housing. The bigger land parcels earmarked for larger house builders, but smaller sites earmarked for someone else. So I think you need to plan for diversity of housing tenures and types.
Great. Thank you. Back to you, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you. Sonia, just on the point about housing allocation, with the 40% affordable homes, do you think that those should be going, say, in the case of Cruise Hill and Chase Park, to Enfield residents, in the case of Thamesmead, purely to Greenwich residents? Or would your vision for the London new towns be that at least a portion of those should be available to Londoners more widely, particularly given the transport investment, for instance, will be funded by all Londoners and not just those in those boroughs?
I'm not sure I can answer that question. It wasn't something we specifically discussed, so I'm not sure. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Assemblymember Baker.
Thanks. And I think mine's the last question. So it's about long-term stewardship. So firstly, Samaya, is that something so there has been a criticism of the previous generations of new towns that long-term stewardship wasn't built in. Is that something that the task force looked at specifically?
Very much so. And one of the principles is about stewardship. And actually some, like the Parks Trust of Milton Keynes and a few other places, did provide some good examples. Some not, but some yes. And it was very much a building block and a cornerstone of Newtown's success. Mm-hmm. Whether you look at international examples or the successful UK examples, there's some form of long-term stewardship. So there was a discussion on setting up the principles and the framework of that early on. So yes, I'm hoping that would be, again, a fundamental aspect of any Newtown designation.
Thanks. And Kate, so what's going on in Thamesmead on that?
So, I mean, Peabody, we see ourselves as a steward of Thamesmead. We've been there since 2015, leading a regeneration programme. We're there for the long term, to grow, to look after, and to be stewards of that area. I think Thamesmead may have suffered in the past from inconsistent governance, so this actually is an opportunity to bring forward a new town with potentially Peabody and other organisations as well, to act as a long-term steward and to look after the place. We have lots of green and blue spaces that we own and we manage ourselves. We have an operational team that we employ directly to look after places. So we have that already in place to bring forward this new town.
And in terms of other partners, you know, how do you make sure that they have the same commitment that you say Peabody have to that long-term stewardship?
Yeah, and I think this comes into whatever could be the delivery vehicle, where you have other partners such as Greenwich or the GLA responsible for governance over those areas as well, is how do we bring those together? How do we get those commitments? And what is the mechanism for doing that? So absolutely.
So the commitment's
that's part-
there, and at some point we'll have to look at the mechanism. Okay. Thanks very much. Back to you, Chair.
We've now reached the end of the first panel discussion. I'd like to thank our first panel of guests for attending this afternoon and for their contributions. We'll now take a short adjournment for 10 minutes while we change panels. Welcome back to the London Assembly's Planning and Regeneration Committee. We now continue our discussion on new towns for London, and I would like to welcome our second panel of guests. In the chamber, we have Louise Duggan, Head of Regeneration and Growth Strategies at the Greater London Authority, Tom Copley, Deputy Mayor of Housing and Residential Development at the Greater London Authority, and Brett Leahy, Strategic Director of Planning, Growth and Infrastructure at the London Borough of Enfield. We'll now progress to our questions. The first question is from myself and is to the Deputy Mayor. And you said that you were delighted that London has been chosen as the location for 2 of the government's new towns. Why does London need new towns?
Thank you very much, Chair. It's good to see the committee. Yes, I'm absolutely delighted. I mean, when the Labour Party in opposition announced its policy of new towns, I said I wanted at least 1 new town in London. And I think perhaps there was some opinions out there that perhaps new towns weren't the right thing for London. But I've always been absolutely clear: if we're having new towns nationally, London should benefit from new towns as well. So when it was announced that we would get not just 1 but 2 new towns, I was absolutely over the moon. And I think the key reason why, from my perspective on the housing side, is that enormous housing target that London has of 88,000 homes per year. It means we need to be really, really ambitious in terms of where those homes can be delivered. And with the New Towns programme, I think comes 2 sort of key advantages in terms of those locations that have been selected. Firstly, we hope and expect additional funding to make them happen. And secondly, having that kind of national government prioritisation, I think, is really, really important. So to have 2 out of the, I think, 12, was it 10 or 12? 12 shortlisted new towns in London, I think is going to be hugely beneficial. But of course, the benefits of new towns do go beyond just housing. There's huge potential there in terms of economic growth, in terms of jobs and things like that, which I'm sure Louise will touch on later in the meeting.
And are there any other locations that you think could accommodate a new town in the future in London, other than the 2 that were selected?
I certainly will. Look, I mean, first of all, let's get these 2 off the ground. But I think potentially, if you look at the whole of London, there are probably a number of other sites that are of the scale and have the potential to be new towns down the line in future. And I see no reason why the 12 locations identified across the country by the New Towns Task Force should be the end of the story. I'd be reluctant to sort of get into specific locations, because the moment you start talking about areas as being potential new towns, suddenly you find perhaps land speculation happens, land prices go up and things like that. So I wouldn't want to speculate on other locations. But I certainly think that 12 over the long term should not be the limit. But for now, let's get these 2 off the ground.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Assemblymember Lord Bailey.
Good afternoon, panel. Tom, I'm going to start with you. Where am I? The New Town Task Force has recommended that the use of development corporations for delivering these new towns. Given the GLA's powers and experience in this area, would you recommend a mayoral development corporation to deliver the 2 new towns we have coming down the pipe?
Thank you for the question, Assemblymember Lord Bailey. So the first thing to say is that no decisions have been made around delivery model yet. That said, as your question points to, mayoral development corporations are one of the options that potentially could be used to deliver one or both of the new towns. As I say, no decision has been made yet. We are in discussion, of course, with the government, with the respective boroughs, and indeed with potential delivery partners in those locations. No decisions have been made as yet. If the decision is taken for an MDC in one or both of those locations, we, of course, do have quite now extensive experience of using MDCs, whether it's LLDC, DC, OPDC, or the new Oxford Street Development Corporation. So they are certainly a good potential option.
I do have to say, though, some OPDC, for instance, hasn't always been the kind words we plain sailing. Many people say it's under-delivered. So bearing that in mind, do you do you think it might be better to give some more local control to any one of these new towns?
Well, I would push back a bit on what you said about OPDC. I mean, in particular, since this mayor came in, and you know, the now former chief executive David Luntz was appointed. You know, huge progress made during his time as chief executive of OPDC. Things are moving ahead very quickly now. Of course, one of the issues that OPDC had was, unlike LLDC, it didn't actually, at that time, when it was created, own any of the land. We're interested in what delivery model will work best in each location. And as I say, at this stage, no decisions have been made. But I think we've got a good, strong track record in general of setting up and operating MDCs.
The LLDC in particular, the GLA, still carry much of that bill. Don't we pay and make the place run? Is that a risk for a new town? The LLDC is relatively small. Correct me if I'm wrong. Some of what we're proposing now, if we had to carry that bill into the future, could be really rather expensive for the GLA. So how would we A, avoid that, and B,
I mean, the premise of the question is correct in that MDCs are not cheap, and they do require funding to set up and funding to operate. And I think that any decision around, you know, the operating model here is very sort of related to, you know, what funding is going to be made available from the government. That would be on both the capital side and the revenue side. But I think my hope would be, in the case of new towns, that there would be a prioritisation for funding because these locations have been actively selected, you know, as places where the government wants to see new housing and economic growth. And
what effect would extra borrowing have? Because if you took on such a large new town, that borrowing would then appear on a GLA's balance sheet or whatever. Would that in itself be a limitation, or could a different financial vehicle be built so you could borrow money but it didn't appear in the GLA? Is there more complications because of the GLA's activity, the mayor's activity with development corporations already?
Well, I mean, borrowing is not necessarily a problem, so long as you're confident you're going to be able to pay it back.
And you're going to have a limit.
I need to just finish my answer. And you're going to get the land receipts and things like that to pay it back. But we also hope and would expect that, you know, these MDC, well, if it turns out to be an MDC or the development corporation, whatever vehicle is selected, it's not going to be, you know, wholly reliant on borrowing. We're expecting, you know, grant funding, for example, to be made available by the government to you know, assist with this.
And the other piece, of course, these are two, from what I can see, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're two very different plans that go on. And one, Thamesmead has a lot of partners in place as it is. Would the mayor support them not having an MDC that involved him because they're quite far advanced in their governorship model?
Well, as I say, we're still alighting on the delivery model in both cases. It's not necessarily a given that the delivery model will be the same in both cases because, as you point out, they are two very different locations. In Thamesmead, Peabody pretty much owns all the land there. They're, of course, partnering with Lend-Lease. Enfield, a bit more mixed. I think the council owns about half the land there. Yeah. And the rest is in various different private ownership. So, you know, they are very different locations. And I think what's important is that in both cases we alight on the delivery model that is going to be most effective in terms of delivering homes and driving economic growth.
Thank you. Brett, I'm going to come to you. Do you think a mayoral development corporation would be the best model for Cruise Hill and Chase Park?
Yes, no, thank you. I'm going to echo Tom Copley's points in the sense that no decision's been made as to, one, whether there'll be a development corporation and ultimately what that model is. From an Enfield perspective, there are expectations that whatever the model ends up being, Enfield is a party to it, is a partner of it, because we're of the view in Enfield that we add value in terms of what the resultant model may look like. And I think a critical piece with the New Towns programme and with this particular new town at Cruise Hill and Chase Park is the stewardship aspect of it. Okay. And Enfield has a clear role in terms of the stewardship of it. The New Towns programme is a 15 to 20 year programme, and so the stewardship is incredibly important, particularly when we all value placemaking and high quality placemaking.
And of course, at some point, 15, 20, 30 years down the line, it will come back to the council, and the council would have to look after it into perpetuity. So I do think you've made a strong point there. What assessment has been made of land ownership across Cruise Hill and Chase Park? And what is the scope for swift land assembly? Because you seem to say you own 50% of it, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's the other 50% you'd have to assemble. Is that going to be tricky or...?
So in terms of the new town for Cruise Hill and Chase Park, I just want to put that to one side for 1 second to answer your question. In the Enfield context, we have an emerging local plan, and that's been in production for 8 years. We've done 4 consultations, 2 borough-wide consultations, as well as 2 statutory consultations, your Regulation 18 and 19. So, and we've just completed 12 weeks of examination by the government inspector. So in terms of Cruise Hill in the local plan allocation and Chase Park, which the new town, if designated, would build upon, we do have clear intelligence in terms of land ownership, but also we have clear intelligence in terms of which landowners are supportive and not supportive. In the Cruise Hill allocation, we know that's primarily grey belt, and that has a high number of landowners. And so we've been working with those landowners and developers throughout the emerging local plan and the 8 years that we've been producing it. So we do have good intelligence in terms of land ownership and the challenges and opportunities of that.
So you effectively, you've been working on it before this new town plan popped up, is what you're saying?
Yes, so we have an emerging local plan that's well publicised, that's in the public domain, and we've got 2 allocations within it. Both are Greenbelt release allocations. One's called Cruise Hill and Chase Park. If the new town is designated, it will build upon the work and foundation that's already been put forward by the local plan.
Okay. And Chair, stop me if I'm stepping on anybody's toes with this next question. And what work have you done about welcoming in new people? Because local councils, rightly so, are hyper-focused on their residents, but you would be building something that would be seen as a resource for all Londoners. So have you started to think through the process of who those Londoners are, how you'll accept them, how many will you release when you do your phases? Will it be locals first, non-locals second? Have you had those conversations?
So again, in terms of the new town, we haven't had those conversations, and those conversations will need to take place. And certainly, if we are designated, then that's an area for conversation. I suppose, thankfully, we have the emerging local plan, and conversations have taken place in that context. And the local plan, just for context for all members, equates to about 9,000 homes for Cruise Hill and Chase Park. So it's a substantial number of new homes, and that's primarily family homes. But the council is very clear that we'll have full nomination rights of those homes. The motivations behind the local plan for Enfield is about supporting the needs of its residents, and particularly those hard-working families that find it incredibly difficult to find family homes.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And Brett, when do you think Londoners could start moving in?
In the context of the new town, or in the context of the local plan allocations?
Well, just in terms of when you think, if whatever timelines you're working to, when do you think those homes could be built and the first Enfield residents could move in?
Yeah, so from a local plan timeline, you could expect homes and commencement of development, because we're at the final stage of the local plan production process. We anticipate the local plan will be adopted in autumn this year, fingers crossed. So one could expect commencement of works sort of towards the end of 2027 if not earlier. In terms of the new town, obviously in new town, in terms of the process and timeline we're currently working to, designation could happen in late spring, early summer. And then there will be a time to mobilise if the government decides to proceed with it, the Development Corporation, and that will take time. But when the new town programme was announced, and in particular when Cruise Hill and Chase Park was referenced in that, government made it very clear that it didn't want to delay the local plan process. And so, yes, you could expect via the local plan homes being delivered within the middle end of 2027.
Thank you. And that was really interesting what you said about the land ownership mix. Just in terms of the 50% which isn't owned by the councils, how many landowners are we talking about in terms of that other 50%? And what proportion of those would you say were supportive versus opposed to the plans you put forward?
So in terms of Cruise Hill, and I'm going from memory here, and my laptop's just died on me, so I can't get the exact number for you, so apologies. But from memory, it's about 80 landowners in Cruise Hill. And the reason why there are many landowners, because it's grey belt. You've got existing developments, existing uses. The nature of grey belt means you have a more sort of diverse range of arrangements and land ownership arrangements to it. Again, from memory, because we've been engaging in this process for nearly 8 years now, I would say approximately 90% of the landowners are supportive of the local plan. There is 10% that aren't, and there are various reasons why they're not. One of the reasons is they want residential on their land, not open space. Or they're maybe not supportive of the plan, and that's not unusual. Most strategic allocations that you do across the land, there will be landowners that are not supportive. But in terms of the 80 landowners on Cruise Hill, a high proportion are on board with the direction of travel. In terms of Chase Park, and again I'm going from memory, there are 4 landowners, and all 4 are on board in terms of the allocation.
Thank you. And just talking about those who aren't supportive, do you think the CPO powers that a mayoral development corporation could bestow would be helpful in terms of getting through the vision that you've set out?
Yeah, I mean, CPO is an important tool. It's a tool that's used across the land to enable strategic delivery of significant strategic sites. In terms of the local plan context, we were very clear and open throughout the examination to the inspector on this. The council is prepared to use CPO. The way Cruise Hill is phased, the CPO will be at the latter stages. And so normally what happens from experience is those landowners slowly go on board with the direction of travel. But yeah, it is a tool available to us, and one would expect if the new town is designated, then that's a tool available for also the new town.
Thank you. Assemblymember Boff.
Mr. Copley, you said earlier that you want London to benefit from the new towns. How did Londoners not benefit from Harlow, Basildon, Crawley, Milton Keynes, Stevenage, Hatfield and Peterborough?
Was the question, how do they not benefit?
How did they not? Because you're saying that you want Londoners to benefit it, and I'm assuming, therefore, that you think that none of those towns, proper new towns, benefited London at all.
Well, there were certainly Londoners that moved out from, poor quality housing, particularly in inner London, to new towns outside of London. But I think it would be of great benefit to Londoners to be able to remain within Greater London, within the capital city, and still be able to move to, brand new, high quality housing, particularly given the great housing need that we have in this city. I'm, ambitious for London. I want London to be able to house our own population, and that's why I think new towns for London would be a fantastic thing.
So, bearing in mind you're quite familiar with the housing waiting list and demand in London, there is no limit on the green belt you could build on then?
There are certainly limits in terms of the green belt that we can build on. And in fact, although the Mayor has now said that we will look at building on the green belt, we want to minimise that as far as possible. And
how do you minimise that?
One way of doing that is building good, decent densities, to make sure that you use the smallest amount possible, to make sure you've got walkable neighbourhoods, to make sure that they are not car dependent, to make sure they've got great amenities. One of the other issues, though, with a lot of greenbelt in London, of course, is that it's very, very far away from public transport, and so would not be appropriate for development. So
basically, it's only safe if it's not near a transport hub.
Well, you say safe, Assembly Member Boff. We need the places that we are building to be accessible by public transport. And there are, you talk about safe from development. There are huge, huge benefits that can be brought through this. A lot of greenbelt is not accessible to the public, is not very biodiverse and performing any function in terms of nature. And actually, you can, by delivering housing on a small portion of it, you can invest substantially in the accessibility and the amenity value of the rest of it.
Once there's still a housing shortage after you've built out the bits of greenbelt that you want to build out, will you build out more greenbelt? Because there will still be a housing problem in London from the plans that you've brought forward.
Assembly Member Boff, we have to plan in London for 880,000 homes over the next year. Next 10 years. That's what the next year. Goodness me. Over the next 10 years, that's what we have to plan for. And the way that we are going to do that is by making sure that we minimise the amount of greenbelt that is needed. The way to do that is to maximise the amount of housing that we can build on brownfield sites,
and
to look at industrial land and things like that.
How will you do that? How will you prioritise brownfield over greenbelt?
Because as a stack Assembly Member Boff, you sweat all of the brownfield that you can.
First,
you look at the industrial land that you've got and whether any more of that can be released. Though with the caveat that industrial land is important for jobs and for the economy of the city.
So you're saying that you won't build on greenbelt while there's brownfield.
I hadn't finished my response, Assembly Member Boff, before you come back in. And then you look at the minimum amount of greenbelt, which would be, there's a lot of greenbelt that is effectively grey belt, as Brett has pointed out around Enfield, that's not accessible, that's not biodiverse. So brownfield first means absolutely maximising the amount of housing that you're delivering on brownfield land. I think, Louise, over the last decade, we've delivered, I think 86% of development in London has been on brownfield land. We will always look to brownfield first, but to get to the numbers that we need to solve the housing crisis that we have in London, for those Londoners who are living in temporary accommodation and who desperately need a home, to build at the level that we need to deliver housing for those people does require a small amount of delivery on the green belt.
Mr. Leahy, you said no decisions made on Cruise Hill. I mean, that sounds a bit agnostic, doesn't it? Like we're just waiting for it to happen to us. You're encouraging this, aren't you?
So we are in a process. The government set the process and the framework in terms of the assessment and considerations of the new town.
But you have an opinion as a council. You have an opinion.
So we do see that the new town opportunity does provide opportunities to the strategic allocations that we've put forward in our local plan. And the administration of Enfield Council, the elected members, have articulated in the public domain, they see this as an opportunity to provide more family homes for hard-working families that can't afford the homes to live and reside in Enfield. Sorry, sir.
I mean, that's just a glib phrase, hard-working. How do you test that they're hard-working before you give them a house? Well, you've just said it. I'm just asking you to justify it.
So we know through families that come to the Civic Centre, the majority of them being working families are seeking temporary accommodation on a monthly basis, given the challenges around housing supply and the needs to meet housing need. In terms of I will go back to local plan because I think it's very helpful actually. The local plan is informed by a housing needs survey, and that housing needs survey identifies needs across all aspects, and the allocations in the local plan are therefore informed by housing needs. So the position around need is set by technical studies that are assessed through the local plan process and through the examination. Thank you.
And how many parks will you actually be building on?
So in terms of the new town, no decision's been made in terms of the red line.
You've drawn a red line, you know where the red line is, and you were complicit in drawing that red line. How many parks in that area?
So no decision's been made in terms of the new towns programme on the red line. If we go back, because that's in the public domain.
You drew that line.
So if we go to the local plan allocations, both Cruise Hill and Chase Park, they clearly confirm that no parks are part of the development, and no parks will be developed on. The Enfield position, both from an administration point of view, but also in terms of the policies that the officers assess developments on, is that we will not be seeking to develop on parks.
So you will not be developing on any parkland.
That's the Enfield position.
It's funny because we had the leader of your council in front of us a little while ago who completely refused to answer that question about whether or not they'd be building on parkland. But we can take that as Enfield's line, that you will not be building on any parks.
So in terms of the local plan position, no parks are being built on. In terms of the new town process, we still need to go through a process. But the local plan position sets the current position.
Oh, so you're saying that the new town proposals will build on parks? Oh, sorry, Ms Duggan, if you want to.
Thank you, Assembly Member Boff. I just think there's a little bit of confusion here around red lines. There is a red line in the emerging London local plan that's been kind of consulted on extensively. The stage of the process that we're at the moment with regards to new town is no decisions have been made, but we've said that. And there's an area of search and testing underway. So there isn't a red line. There is a series of testing, searching, examining, technical studies and due diligence.
We were just told earlier, Ms Duggan, that by the lady from Newtown's task force that there was a red line. Mr Leahy had just said there's a red line. So you're saying there is no red line?
Just sorry, I've confirmed there's no red line for the new town at this stage. That's still part of the process we need to go through with the government. Are going through an SEA, a Sustainability Environment Appraisal. That's a planning tool, a statutory framework tool. And so there's still a process to go through before the red line is defined. Because obviously, one needs to assess the potential environmental impacts, and that will naturally shape the red line. The red line, as Louise Duggan articulated, that I've referred to, is the two red lines that circle Cruise Hill and Chase Park in the local plan. Now, Chase Park does not include Trent Park. That's very clear. And Cruise Hill does not seek to develop on any parks within that red line of the local plan. Thank you, sir.
Even though it's called a park. Thank you.
Assembly Member Baker.
Thanks, Chair. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions about transport infrastructure. And so to the whole panel, we heard in our previous meeting and also we discussed in our first panel that transport improvements or new transport infrastructure should precede the housing delivery in major developments. Do you agree, and how feasible is this for new towns? Not generally.
Thank you, Assembly Member Baker. I'm happy to start on that one. Yes, we absolutely agree, and one of the Newtown Task Force's 10 principles was, of course, transport connectivity. And in relation to Thamesmead specifically, the Task Force report was very clear that without the DLR extension, Thamesmead could not support a new town. So, of course, we were absolutely delighted when in the budget the Chancellor confirmed the government support for the DLR extension, which will now go ahead, supporting those 15,000 homes in that location, as well as up to another 15,000 on the other side of the river. So we're, very, very delighted about that. And, of course, in the context of the history of Thamesmead, when the original Thamesmead estate was built by the GLC, it came with the promise of what was then going to be called the Fleet Line coming out to Thamesmead. That, of course, was cancelled in the late 1970s, and in the end, the Jubilee Line extension, when it was built, did not go out via Thamesmead. So that really is fulfilling a very, very old promise of putting Thamesmead onto the tube map. In terms of Enfield, of course, this really, the designation of Enfield as a new town really strengthens the case for the devolution to TfL of the Great Northern Inners, and we are having very good discussions with the Department for Transport about that being devolved to TfL.
Thank you. I'll come to you, Brett, on the Cruise Hill and Chase Park for a second. Just on Thamesmead, obviously we heard just now in the panel that when we start to have the first homes, in likelihood, in Thamesmead, when we first start to have the first homes in the new town, the new station, the new DLR extension won't quite be operational, and they're going to basically take the strain with the Superloop in hopefully the short term. How concerned are you that will affect the attractiveness of people coming to the new town? And is there anything additional that, since it, from the Mayor's point of view, from the GLA's point of view, that could be done to mitigate that?
Well, firstly, of course, we're getting the sort of bus rapid transit. That's already been agreed. I think it was agreed as part of the bill funding, the Brownfield infrastructure funding. So that will be an improvement. And, the DLR, in terms of transport infrastructure, compared to a lot of transport infrastructure, it's quite a quick and easy, in terms of infrastructure to deliver.
I'm fairly sure I addressed all that in my additional question, which was, we know it will come, it won't take that long, but on day one, people will rely on bus transit, the Superloop, to get them where. Yeah. So is there anything else that needs to be done to mitigate it, and are you concerned that it'll impact the attractiveness of people moving to Thamesmead?
I think people will move with the promise. Now it's been confirmed. It's been signed off by the Chancellor. It is going ahead. We'll have the Transport and Works Act this year, I think. It's this year. We are in 2026 now, yes. We'll have the Transport and Works Act order this year, and I think that what that does is just build the confidence for people to move there. And actually, you saw it with, the Elizabeth line, just having all that confirmed and under construction had the effect of making these locations along the line much more attractive for people to move to.
And I'd just add to that and say that, it is a bus rapid transit. Yes. That's supporting that accessibility, but it is connecting to the Elizabeth line. So it's not like it's connecting to a branch line that will then kind of shuffle into town slowly.
Yeah, no worries. So, Brett, in terms of Cruise Hill and Chase Park, what's your assessment? We're hearing about, obviously, the devolution of rail and potential service improvements. What transport improvements do you think are needed to support a town of potentially 21,000 homes?
Thank you. They've been outlined, so there's probably several components to it. So the metralisation, we're very supportive of that opportunity, but also in terms of the need for adequate bus provision, and that to be, sustainable in several ways. But we also recognise that, it needs to be an integrated transport system. Yeah. So Enfield are very successful in terms of our cycle networks. Work very closely with TfL in terms of the provision of that, and we've just done a fantastic network leading all the way up to Broxbourne, outside of London. But also there's an element of that car light piece as well, being an outer London borough. So we very much see and working with our GLATF colleagues in terms of ensuring it's an integrated transport system.
Yeah. So you feel confident that the things that are on the table are going to deliver the transport infrastructure needed? In terms of the conversations that I've been unsighted on, yes. Yeah. Obviously, we need it signed on the dotted line, but that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brett, just to continue on that point around metroisation, we heard in the previous panel TfL mentioned something like 6 to 8 services an hour going through that station if it was devolved to them and metroisation was successfully done. Would that be welcome? Would that be enough?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So, yeah, that would be welcomed. And I think that when it comes to any provision of transport, we know it will take time to mobilise any development. And the programme, even for Cruise Hill Chase Park, but also the new town will be over a life 10 to 15 years. And so there's opportunity to make sure that that transport provision is provided as the development proceeds and the new communities grow. But yes, in terms of the various studies that we've done under the local plan, but also in terms of the work that's been conducted so far, yes.
Thank you very much. Assemblymember Garbutt. Oh, sorry, Louise.
And can I just kind of add to that, like Brett's been talking about the detailed knowledge that they've built up through the local plan process, and I think that, you know, this is just an example of the catalytic effect of the different layers of government working together. So you have that assessment around the 9,000 homes. We know that if we want to get to the 21,000 homes, we need to get into the heavier rail infrastructure. And those conversations had been progressing. So this is not something that has been triggered by the new town. It's something that TfL were already doing. The result of kind of a new town framing of this opportunity just means all of the right people are around the table having the right conversations. And that has the potential to just sort of bring things on in the right order and make sure that every single opportunity is kind of optimised.
It's good to see that joined up work is happening and has been happening for some time. Assemblymember Garbutt.
Afternoon. I'm going to ask a couple of questions on housing and the housing ambition. So coming to you first, Deputy Mayor, what would you say is the housing priority for new towns?
Well, I mean, there was a fundamental criteria that the New Towns Task Force has, which was the locations have to support at least 10,000 homes, which, of course, is the case in both of these, 21,000 at Chase Park, 15,000 at Thamesmead. And clearly, we want to be delivering a substantial share of affordable housing in these locations, but also really good design, high quality, sustainable homes as well, with walkable neighbourhoods, cycle routes and things like that. We want to be building great places for people to live. We don't want to be building dormitories either. We want there to be, you know, amenities and things like that, jobs, etc., in these locations too.
So, in terms of the minimum requirement for it to be 40% affordable homes, is there anything that you want to see to kind of push that to be more ambitious and to make sure we get as many as we can as social homes? Because when you were talking about the 880,000 target, obviously you said that there's a priority around temporary accommodation, so that would imply that we want to maximise the amount of social homes and those, genuinely affordable tenures. So I didn't know if you're pushing that and making sure that there's more affordable tenures, and then I'll ask my other.
Yeah, well, we need to have a really good mix. So, as you say, the New Towns Task Force set out a minimum target of 40%, of which half would be for social rent. Of course, in Enfield, be given the Greenbelt element, according to the Golden Rules, 50% of any homes on the Greenbelt should be affordable housing. So that's really, really important. And we're going to be using our funding levers through the Social and Affordable Homes Programme to support the delivery of affordable homes in these locations. In fact, of course, we're already doing that in Thamesmead through Peabody. But it's also important as well that there are homes for people to buy as well as this. We've got a shortage of homes across all tenures in London, so we want to maximise the level of affordable while making sure we're delivering a diverse range of tenures.
And obviously, when we did the investigation around the Affordable Homes Programme recently, we made a recommendation about the Mayor needing to be more forceful around the tenures as well as accessible homes and family homes that we need to see coming through. How are you thinking about that in terms of new towns? Because, you know, as we heard in our first panel from people like Shelter, with the fact that this, you know, having public, the priority around this being public-led and the opportunity we have to really bring forward the homes that are needed.
Well, as you know, Assemblymember Garbutt, 60% of our social and affordable homes programme at minimum will be for social rent. And actually, I would expect it to be a higher proportion than that. Other tenures that we will fund include key worker living rent. And, you know, Brett was talking earlier about hardworking people, hardworking families. Key worker living rent would be a fantastic tenure for those people, and we'd love to see some key worker living rent delivered at both of these new town locations. In terms of family housing, you know, I know that that's a priority, particularly for Enfield. We would look to support family-sized housing as well through our affordable homes programme, noting that the way, noting that the funding is on a per unit basis, but that we can flex it to take into flex grant rates to take into account large numbers of family-sized homes.
So do you think it does offer a new, different opportunity to maximise those kind of the genuinely affordable kind of social home tenure? Do you think that this is going to deliver more of a? I know you said that it would be 50% on. Obviously, I share Assemblymember Boff's concerns around the use of the green belt and making sure that, you know, you just said that it would be 50% affordable. So do you know what percentage of social homes will be part of that?
I mean, there'll be 50% of the social, so that would be then 25% overall. And I mean, you do say greenbelt, but I think I'm right in saying, Brett, a lot of the greenbelt around Cruise Hill certainly is greenhouses rather than you know, rolling fields, I think.
Yes. So in terms of Cruise Hill, it's primarily grey belts, and I'll be happy to answer any questions in terms of the wider area, in terms of the status of that land and its classifications. Thank you.
I might come back to that. I'm just going to sticking with housing. Oh, Ellie, you've got your mic on. I mean, yeah, I think that is a concern that a couple of us have on this committee around the designation. I think that's what Assemblymember Boff was getting at earlier in terms of the red line and what land is inside that and what the consideration has been. Because I was raising in the first panel about the phasing of different kind of regulations. Obviously, we've got the Greenbelt Review and the London Plan coming, but this seems to be kind of jumping ahead of that. So that's my concern, that we haven't had the regulations put in place. We're kind of making those designations and those decisions now ahead of the consultation and the regulations. That was, yeah. Well, either of you, yeah.
So, I mean, the first point is to offer reassurance to the Assembly members, any Greenbelt release has to go through the appropriate planning process in terms of policies and statutory requirements. So if the new town is designated, any Greenbelt release within it will have to go through the processes that we have in place to justify that release. And I'm happy, if it's helpful, to go into detail potentially what that looks like. In the context of Cruise Hill and Chase Park, and I suppose in the context of Enfield, we're in a more advanced stage, given the fact that you've got two allocations up to 9,000 homes that are already proposing to release the Greenbelt. The local plan that supports that has been in production for 8 years. And there's been a Regulation 18 and 19 statutory consultation, and we've just done 12 weeks of examination with the inspector. Now, in my career, I've done 4 local plans. Most local plans take 4 to 5 weeks in terms of examination. Enfield local plan took 12 weeks, and the inspector's been absolutely forensic in terms of the assessment of the local plan, and in particular, the Cruise Hill and Chase Park allocations that seek to release the Greenbelt. Now, in terms of the justification of the Greenbelt, based on the local plan, it is about the environment. It's actually about enhancing the environment in terms of green and blue, and I'm happy to expand further on that. It's also about providing affordable homes and more affordable homes in terms of the points that the Deputy Mayor has outlined. It's also about flood mitigation. So if you look at Chase Park, for example, as an allocation, by enabling that allocation to come forward, you actually mitigate flooding for existing properties that lie to the south. So you're actually...
Can you explain how that works?
Because in terms of the Chase Park, for example, on the local plan, roughly speaking, 45% of it is about built development, 55% of it is about restoring the rural landscape. And part of the restoration of the rural landscape is about enhancing biodiversity, it's about improving access to that landscape, because we have a public health challenge, both for mental and physical health. So it's about providing more access in a current inaccessible location for
I meant
residents.
about the flood
Yeah,
risk.
no, I'm coming on to that. Sorry, Simon, I am. Sorry. We're naturalising the rivers. So we have a number of rivers that run through Enfield. We have a programme with DEFRA and the EA, a big programme.
Yeah, I went to visit it a couple of years ago.
Yes, a 20-year programme, £68 million programme. Part of that programme is naturalisation of rivers. At the moment, they're fast-flowing. So you naturalise it, you slow the water down. By slowing the water down, you mitigate flooding. And you not only mitigate flooding from new
But I guess you could do that. I guess the challenge I've got is building on the green belt is one of the biggest risks is around flood risk. So you could kind of do that stuff without it's not that building on the green belt helps with reduces the flood risk.
Yeah, in terms of the Chase Park allocation local plan, the development enables significant mitigation around landscape recovery, but also around naturalisation of the river. So in this instance, it's not an or, it's an and. That actually you can have homes, affordable homes, but also you can restore the landscape to its natural setting, which includes naturalisation of rivers. So I have a head of rural transformation in my directorate, the only one in London, and we're very much immersed in this space, and we have the landscape recovery programme with DEFRA, the biggest in London.
Yeah, I appreciate that bit, and that bit's great. I just think it's the challenge of how the building element. But I guess you've explained it really clearly about what's happening on the site, though.
Can I just comment on this? Because I think what Brett's setting out is some of the real sort of win-win-wins that you can get out of this. And there's another example in West London. I think it's called Hanwell House. Dilapidated, stately home based in some green belt. The council and the mayor, I think it was last year, approved the delivery of several hundred homes on that site, of which I think 50% were affordable, opening up that what's currently inaccessible green belt, adding to its value, landscaping, things like that, and restoring the stately home. And it's things like this where,
I guess my question was about flood risk,
by taking somewhat of a more flexible position, you can deliver enhancements. That's what I'm talking about, general enhancements, whether it is mitigating flood risk, whether it is opening up and making Greenbelt, increasing its amenity value or its accessibility, whether it's restoring, a historic building. The benefits of doing all of these, the benefits of doing that development creates all these other wins.
Yeah, I guess the focus I was trying to get to was the climate impact and the flood risk mitigation from the Greenbelt.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in. I'm really glad that Brett brought up the rural transformation, because I think it was part of what the task force saw as a kind of a strength of this site, is that there was a really good understanding of the landscape and how it can actually be an asset here. And again, I just want to kind of possibly labour that point, but this is a lot of work that's been happening in the background that is just beginning to kind of bear fruit now, and the bringing it all together just really catalyses things. The other thing I wanted to note was that, again, bringing it back to the kind of the New Towns process, Government at the moment is undertaking a strategic environmental assessment of the whole programme, and in that process they are taking stock of any environmental impacts on any of the designated sites surrounding the areas of search that are being looked at. So that, that is due to open for consultation in spring, is what we've been told by government, and that will again, I think, Assemblymember Garbutt, begin to unpack and expose some of those calculations and balances that are being made in the.
Who's doing that? Sorry, who's doing the climate risks bit. Who's doing the climate risk assessment? Is that what you said? Climate risk assessment?
It's a strategic environmental assessment that's being undertaken, and it's being done by government. It's been commissioned by government. I can't tell you who the consultants are. Not because I can't, because I don't know.
Yeah, it did.
Not
a little
like
bit. Secrets. Yeah, and what we asked the other panel was how organisations like CPRE and other kind of nature groups, and I know you've got a number of them that work in partnership in Enfield, but how they've been kind of consulted and involved in any of these plans that are coming forward.
In terms of the new town,
yeah.
If designation takes place, then conversation will be around engagement and consultation with all groups to, capture views and to help shape ultimately what that new town looks like. In terms of the programme of works we have currently and the landscape recovery project, yes, we do engage with all groups, and that has fed into the local plan. The local plan supports and integrates the rural landscape recovery. It's landscape-led placemaking. Yeah, which is a fantastic opportunity.
Yeah, I'm fully supportive of, some of the elements I saw when I visited Enfield were brilliant in terms of, the river restoration. But I guess I'm interested in how groups are being consulted specifically on the development end and the kind of homes and where they're built, like how you're hearing those voices. And it's interesting you said that they might be consulted after the designation, not listening to the voices before, or is it within the local plan that you're listening to those voices?
So one's been listening to those voices through the local plan process. In terms of the programme for the new town, at the moment we've only been shortlisted. There's a SEA process, and that SEA process will involve engaging with those statutory consultees who ultimately have the statutory responsibilities around matters such as the environment. So the government will be commencing, as I understand it, that process shortly. And that process is obviously a legal statutory process that will enable those statutory bodies with their statutory responsibilities to engage in it. I understand that's imminent, and that will then help shape, one, whether the new town is designated. And if it is designated, then it's about then the process, like with a local plan. You then go for a process of, development consultation in terms of ultimately what it ends up looking like. The designation doesn't set what it looks like and the terms of it. There will be a process to go through.
Oh, absolutely, and that's really important. I guess I was trying to challenge who's been involved in whether it happens in the first place, and then of course there's that. And how about the organisations like CPRE? Have you been working closely with them?
On the new town, if we want to talk about specifically the new town one, the consultation on that SEA will open in spring. Again, is the time frame that we've been given by government, and then it will open and there will be a period of consultation. I think that
will that happen before or after the local elections? Because presumably, can it run during the pre-election period?
It can run during the pre-election.
Because we're running out of time.
They
couldn't announce anything during the pre-election.
But the consultation can happen.
Exactly. Yeah.
Everyone's like, okay. I thought I was running out of time, but we were actually on track, which is fine. I just want to ask a quick question on community land trust, which I know is something that's come up a lot through Housing Committee, and we spoke about at the first panel about the importance of, this is an opportunity to use and work with land in a different way around community land trust, and it's something that. Previously the Housing Committee's been really interested in, but we feel that sometimes it's not, it's something that people want, but it's not really kind of encouraged or supported. So how do we make sure that is delivered on these sites?
Well, we're able to fund community land trusts through the new social and affordable homes programme. I think that they are very, very challenging, as we know, particularly because these are small organisations that don't have the development expertise of much larger organisations. They generally require land to be put in for free as well, so it would require a landowner essentially to donate land on a peppercorn. But they are things that we would like to support, and if there are any groups in either location that are interested in setting up a community land trust, then they should have a conversation with our team. and indeed with the relevant boroughs.
Great. Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. And just following up on the housing questions that Assemblymember Garbett was just talking through, in terms of allocations, Deputy Mayor, obviously the transport investment which will enable some of these sites, so take for instance the metroisation and devolution of Great Northern Inns to TfL, will be borne by all Londoners, and new towns are being at least promoted as something that would, in the case of London's new towns, be for all Londoners. Do you think that allocation should be focused only on the borough in which those new towns are actually located, or should an allocation be more broad than that?
Sorry, which allocation? Sorry.
In terms of for social houses within the new towns? Should they just go to Enfield residents? Should they just go to Greenwich residents? Or, given that Newtown investment will be borne by all Londoners in terms of the transport, is there a potential to look more widely?
I mean, I'm certainly working on the basis that, as is always, well, pretty much always, or usually the case, it will be the borough in which the new town is located that has the nomination rights. That I've not heard anything to the contrary on that.
And is that your personal? You'd be in favour of that staying the same?
I mean, I think it would be very, very. I think it would be very, very difficult, very, very challenging to say to a borough, you know, you're going to have a new town, but you don't get all of the nomination rights. I think that would be extremely challenging. Louise, did you want to come in on that?
I'm just going to be a classic technocrat and say, but no decisions have been made yet, and the stage in the process where we're at, those conversations have not been buttoned down, but like those principles do apply. Yeah.
Assemblymember Lord Bailey.
Come on, Tom, you're the Deputy Mayor for Housing for all of London. Surely, if London is going to lever extra money out of a government, get special dispensation paying for train stations, surely you could say to Enfield and Greenwich, you can get some of the nominations, most of the nominations, but surely you, as London Deputy Mayor for all of London, will say to him, you've got to include other Londoners in the nominations, surely.
I mean, as I remember, Bailey, it's never been, Lord Bailey, it's never been. This question has never been raised with me before. I think it would be enormously challenging, and I would revert to what Louise just said, which is that no decisions have been
Well, when those
taken.
decisions are being made, I make a plea on behalf of those
But
Londoners.
I hear your plea.
Yeah, who are homeless, who are drifting around, who are sofa surfing, who don't have a council to represent them. They're relying on you to do that, and I get that you've never been asked this question before, but 2 new towns have also never been proposed on your watch before, so new things are going to have to happen.
Assemblymember Boff.
Mr. Copley, have you read the London Food Strategy?
I haven't read the London Food Strategy.
Well,
Assemblymember
obviously, bearing in mind your rather dismissive statement with regard to greenhouses. One of the Mayor's aims is to produce more food in London, not reduce our ability to do it. Mr. Leahy.
They're garden centres, Assemblymember Boff. So I don't know how much. I don't know how much actual food is being grown in those locations. I'm sure there are a lot of flowers being sold potentially and things like that.
You've got a problem with flowers and green things?
Sorry?
The environment, you've got a problem with flowers?
Absolutely not. I love flowers, Assemblymember.
Yes. As long as they're shipped in
I love flowers, but I also love homes that people can live in.
Yes, me too.
And we have a chronic shortage of housing in London, Assemblymember Boff. As you're aware, we've got
could get all the homes
1 in 21 children living in temporary accommodation.
You could get all the homes you need, Mr. Copley, by just building on Hyde Park. But you don't
I remember you said this to me once in an assembly
and you don't do it
meeting
because there's a value to Hyde Park.
I remember you saying this to me in an assembly meeting many years ago, and it reminded me of something I think it was Peter Murray. I heard Peter Murray say on a panel once, which was you can't have a sensible grown-up debate around the Greenbelt, and your comment about Hyde Park sort of embodies that. But thankfully now we are having a sensible grown-up debate about the Greenbelt, and it's because of the Mayor of London.
But it should be based upon some facts. I mean, you mentioned earlier about the example of Hanwell House. Of course, it wasn't Greenbelt, was it? It was a conservation area.
I think it was. I'd have to check. I thought it was Greenbelt, Assemblymember.
And one of the prime objectives.
My recollection is that it was Greenbelt. I can go away and check, but my recollection is that it was Greenbelt.
No, it was a conservation area, and one of the prime people against it was this chap called James Murray. You may have been familiar with his work.
I've heard of him.
Yes.
I've heard of him, Assembly Member Boff.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Now, Mr. Leahy, you're saying that, and again, all the glib stuff about family homes that you're going to try and deliver, whereas the Deputy Mayor for Planning is saying, well, there can be no such priority for family homes, that they need to maximise the use of that ground. I mean, you sell it like it's Poundbury, whereas the Deputy Mayor sells it like it's Mega City 1. Where's the truth here?
Thank you, Deputy Chair. So in terms of the Enfield position, it is about family homes, and the strategic allocations in the local plan demonstrate that it's about family homes. And
Have you had a conversation with the Deputy Mayor for Planning on this?
so
He was quite explicit to us.
in terms of the conversations around the new town, we are still going through the process in terms of the type and nature of the homes that potentially could be delivered via the New Towns programme and this particular new town.
And
Can I just add something to that? You can achieve pretty good density and family housing through things like townhouses, mansion blocks, masonettes, and the like. So the range of typologies can provide family-sized housing.
If you can give us a commitment to have a meeting with Jules Piper about that aspiration, it would be nice to know exactly where the administration is pointing. I was going to talk about your other dismissive attitude to CLTs, which are a marvellous contribution to resolving the housing
Excuse me,
problem.
Assembly Member Boff, I was not dismissive. I said we're delighted to support CLTs. In fact, we have supported and funded CLTs. I simply pointed out that delivering housing through CLTs is very, very challenging. And I don't think you do anyone any services by pretending that something is easier than it is. We seek to support CLTs. We've done that through the Community-Led Housing Hub. We've done it through our Community Housing Fund. We'll continue to do it through the Social and Affordable Homes Programme.
I don't know if you've just discovered the building housing in London is quite difficult and challenging, but, you know. Let's move on. Ms Duggan, the Minister of Housing has basically said there's no pot of money for new towns. What level of funding would you expect for them?
I mean, on the one, you know, I think what you're seeing today with the people in front of you right now is that London government stands united to meet the kind of national housing mission, and we're eager to do that, and doing that at scale through things where you align different incentives and different programmes across different scales of government is one of the ways that we're going to make a dent in that number, in those numbers. In terms of making the best case for London, London is almost 25% of GDP is created in London. London is relatively kind of wealthy, but it is a net contributor to the exchequer. What we want to do is make a case for fair funding for London. So we will be advocating for the funding that's required to unlock the ambition in terms of quality, in terms of viability, in terms of affordability, in terms of sustainability. And that includes things like aligning the rural transformation work with this. It includes things like the devolution and metroisation conversations that we will be having with government. And it includes the pulling every lever we have, including the affordable and social housing programme. But there will be a cost, and we need to have an honest conversation with government about the mix of funding sources that we can use to do that. London will come to the table, but it looks for a kind of a fair contribution rather than being expected to meet all of those costs within existing budgets.
I mean, if you're going to fund the expansion, I mean, these aren't new towns, they're urban sprawl, but if you're going to fund the expansion through, sorry, did you want to come out? If you want to fund that extension to London, How are you going to do it to get the money up front? Because a lot of developments rely upon sales in order to build the next tranche of homes, and that makes it a very, very long prospect and an awful lot of development blight. And the Deputy Mayor knows I have some personal experience of that on Barking Riverside, which incidentally is not a new town. It's no matter how you might call it that, it doesn't fit the specification of the 1946 Act. But so how are we going to get that money up front to ensure progress?
Well, I think this is exactly where the conversations are at the moment with government. In this funny phase that we're in, where we've been kind of shortlisted, but we haven't been designated, we are already making the point that we're going to need a mix of funding that enables us to deal with exactly what you're talking about, which is essentially cash flow crisis, cash flow challenges at the early part of development. We don't think it's all going to come from the public purse, but we do think that part of what you're doing by getting the critical mass at this scale is that some comes from the public purse. That builds the confidence and attracts some from various investors. There are already significant investors. There are already developers that want to work with us to get the best kind of the optimized development in this part of the world. And I just think that it's aligning all of those different interests so that the clarity and the confidence is there, the public sector commitment is there, and that begins to unlock some of the private investment. We also have 50% ownership within LBE's ownership, and there's potential there around land value capture as well. So just like we're looking everywhere, we're also examining every option in terms of the mix of financing that will help us to overcome those challenges. Not that I'm suggesting it will be easy.
Yeah, we fully expect funding to be made available for new towns. This is a priority for the government. They were a manifesto commitment. An awful lot of work has already gone into them and continues to go into them. So, yeah, I fully expect funding public money will be made available for both of the new towns in London.
Manifesto commitment. It's hard not to chuckle there at that point, but we'll let you have that one. We talked to Miss Greenway from Peabody at the first session, and I implored her to look at the plan as you develop. There is a plan to invest upfront in social infrastructure as well. It can be quite miserable on these new developments unless there is a bit of subsidy. And are you prepared for that?
I mean, if we get designated, the detailed, and again, Brett would make the point that you build on the work that they've already done. So it's not like it's a kind of a blank sheet that we're working on. There's knowledge already about the number of schools, GPs, etc., that would be required to get us to 9,000. And then there is a kind of a jumping off point there where you begin to understand what's required in that wider social infrastructure. And I would say including access to good quality green space.
The only thing I was going to add to that, Deputy Chair, is the point that the New Towns programme makes it very clear that this programme is about infrastructure, and in particular social infrastructure, and that infrastructure coming first. That's the sort of basis of the New Towns designation and purpose. Thank you.
I mean, you're prepared for the arguments about spending an awful lot of money on community halls they can never fill, which is the kind of thing that you are going to have to face. Are you prepared for that?
Absolutely.
Sports centres that are, quite a way away from other places.
Absolutely, Deputy Chair. I mean, Milton Keynes is a good example. I have, my experience of Milton Keynes, and so phasing of infrastructure is absolutely critical.
And I'd also say there's like a lot of interesting work happening at the moment in the UK, abroad. There's a lot of thinking about, what is the civic infrastructure that you need in places. There are institutions that used to provide these, like the church, for example, or other kind of religious houses. And essentially, what are they? They are a big They are a big space that's covered, that is accessible to a community at a low or no cost. So we're absolutely thinking of those models about how you kind of build out a density so there's a sense of identity and community there, but also have those low threshold spaces where people can come together and get to know each other and build those connections and the meaning that we all need to actually live good lives.
I agree with you.
Can I just come in? And also, you're... Assemblyman Boff, you talk about this as if sort of, you know, it's a kind of an impossible mountain to climb, or it's never been done. I mean, we've got some fantastic examples, particularly in the Netherlands, of brilliant new towns or urban extensions that have been created that have all the community facilities, that are sustainable, that are walkable, that do have good public transport. I want that for here. I'm ambitious for this city, and I want us to be. If it's good enough for Rotterdam, it should be. I want it in London. I don't want us to miss out on this. I'm ambitious for London, and new towns needs to be a part of that. And earlier, I mean, you mentioned urban sprawl. The whole point of achieving the densities we want to achieve, it's not going to be urban sprawl. These are going to be great neighbourhoods. These are going to be walkable, and people are going to be able to cycle and get to where they need to go to. I mean, I presume in the 1930s you would have opposed the development of Metroland and all these houses that now people live in and absolutely love.
Well, if you'd like to go back on my published documents going back more than 12 years, you'll realise I'm very much in favour of new towns, proper new towns that have the respect the green belt. Anyway, going back to yourself, Ms Duggan, it is quite important that we build that infrastructure. And it's important that we build places to meet, like religious houses, but nothing works quite as good as a public house. It's something I've been deprived of for so many years in my new town extension. Can we consider that being put in as a priority along with all the other things?
I mean, I'm tempted to mention Ebenezer Howard, and I think he was one of the teetotalers, wasn't he? He was like, but I think again, I'm not trying to pretend it needs to be one thing or the other. I think being realistic about what you can build in terms of community cohesion early on, what you can afford to build, how you give that kind of ongoing access, and how it doesn't get kind of captured just by one group within the community. It stays something that's open to all people to access and to form and reform as the community develops, I think is really important. And we're absolutely thinking carefully and trying to be kind of careful and spare in the way that we create these spaces, because otherwise they become a kind of a burden rather than an asset. So we just need to be really kind of careful about that, I think, as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, in our last meeting we heard very clearly that from experts that they think land value capture should be employed to help finance the new towns, including any transport improvements they might need, and obviously the transport improvements are quite significant in the case of London's two new towns. Would you agree with that assessment? And just secondly, what form of land value capture do you think should be employed? Because obviously the one used for Crossrail is different from the one used for the Northern Line extension. So not just land value capture itself, but what type of land value capture should we be deploying?
I mean, the first question is easier than the second. Yes, absolutely. We want land value capture, and Louise has sort of touched on that. As to what form it takes, in some ways, not every form of land value capture will work in every location, so we need to look at that very carefully. So, for example, the Northern Line extension was TIF funding, which I think is borrowing against future business rates. That only works, of course, in areas where you know you're going to get that big uplift in business rates. So it's not necessarily an appropriate mechanism in other places. In principle, though, the mayor supports London and having the devolved ability to create these kinds of land value capture mechanisms. I mean, Crossrail, of course, had MSIL and the business rates supplement. I think we need to look at the locations and think about the right form of land value capture for the right location. But the principle is very strongly supported.
We also heard that the mayor should be given more power to be able to capture land without having to go kind of cap in hand to the Treasury anytime a big transport infrastructure project is needed. And this is something which is very common in cities in France, cities which are a hell of a lot smaller than our city, which is the biggest in Western Europe. Do you agree with this? And yeah, if so, what form could those powers take?
I think if you ask me any question, which is essentially, is there a way we can not go cap in hand to the Treasury for something? I'd say absolutely. I don't want to have to go cap in hand to the Treasury. I'm very much pro devolution. You know, I do think that not just the Mayor of London, but mayors in other parts of the country should have similar abilities to, you know, some of these European cities and have much more ability and discretion to be able to initiate and fund these projects themselves without having to come to national government. I think, you know, just stepping up to a national level, I think one of the reasons why in England only 15% of cities in England have, with a population of 250,000 or more, have a metro system, compared to, I think, 85% in Germany, 65% in Poland, is because we are far too centralised and have to go through the Treasury for far too much.
Yeah, I would agree. And Business London have done a bit of work on land value capture and released a report suggesting a resi TIF, which would allow the GLA to keep a proportion of stamp duty land tax generated by new development along train lines, where transport investment has been funded by Londoners. The thought is that Londoners should also get some benefit from the new housing that's coming forward. Would that be something that you think could be looked at?
I'll have to read the report, but Business London do a lot of great and helpful work and make a really useful contribution to the debate, so I will have a look at that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, if you could let us know your thoughts on that, that would be fantastic once you've had a read. The last question is from myself, and it just concerns the long-term stewardship of new towns and what they should look like. We'll go to Brett first and then to Deputy Mayor and Louise.
Yeah, stewardship is one of the core principles for the New Towns programme. And certainly is critical in terms of really achieving good placemaking and the quality piece. And so that's a key component that we are in conversation around. And Enfield, and the fact that the new town, if designated, is very much within the Enfield borough, there's a real opportunity that Enfield can add real value to stewardship. I want to give members a sort of specific example around that, and that does go back to the Rural Landscape Recovery piece. That is about stewardship, the local plan, but the new town, the expectation will be for it to fully integrate that. And so you have that landscape-led placemaking, a unique opportunity. And so the nature recovery and this sort of management of that landscape for the benefit of existing and future residents will be part of that stewardship piece. But yeah, it's a critical component in terms of successful communities.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I mean, the stewardship question is really, really important. And, you know, I'm sure, and you know, just again, to be clear, there's been no decision yet on delivery models, but just thinking about the example of LLDC as a mayoral development corporation, you know, that has recently gone through a transition, starting to return powers to the boroughs. And I'm sure that there are learnings, you know, if an MDC is chosen in one or both locations, there will be learnings, you know, from that, because ultimately one would, you know, expect in no matter what the delivery model, in the long term, it is the borough that will be the custodian of the location, and we always have to bear that in mind.
Yeah, and it's kind of like the end game is we'll return back to Enfield, so it needs to be done in partnership, and we're really, really, really mindful and respectful of that. And again, just imagining that the you know, if you think about the phase, like we're at this interregnum period, we haven't had a decision, but we're having to do preparatory works and just due diligence and get things teed up. If we end up having a phase where it's 10, 15, 20 years of a development corporation of one form or another, the luxury that allows you is to be singular in a particular place on the kind of bold moves required to unleash and unlock the potential of a particular place. The kind of the brilliance and the kind of genius of local government is it's a 360 service and it's having to deal with everything all the time. So that idea that we kind of carve out some space for a kind of quite singular coordinated action to happen in partnership with the borough, but then we're always anticipating the kind of sunset phase, which is back to you guys, and we don't want to be handing them a liability back, and they don't want to be receiving a liability back. So their engagement over that time will be integral to making sure that that long-term stewardship is priced into everything that we're kind of doing and the decisions we're making.
Assemblymember Boff.
That was quick, before I even thought what to say. Deputy Mayor, would you use Barking Riverside as a model of the stewardship?
I think we do have a good model at Barking Riverside, in particular the KIC, the community infrastructure, the community company that will ultimately take on responsibility for a lot of the services there that are currently provided by Barking Riverside Limited. I do think that Barking Riverside is a good model, and you might expect me to say that as a board member of Barking
Yes,
Riverside.
of course
Limited.
I would. Of course, Barking Riverside...
Declaring my interest, Chair, sorry, given
yes,
it's been
I
raised.
agree. If we're talking about it, actually, I should
You should
too.
declare an interest as well, Member Boff. Yeah. We're all declaring interest right at the end of the meeting.
Deputy Mayor and Assemblymember Boff.
Sorry. That's interesting because, of course, Barking Riverside Limited don't publish their meetings, don't publish anything about how the decisions were made.
We're a private company, Assemblymember Boff, and a lot of information is commercially confidential. We are a private company.
I can absolutely understand publishing a redacted minutes, where the bits that you want to talk about need to be redacted. We've all, been long enough in local authorities to know that that's what they don't publish anything. Not a thing. I don't know when the meetings are. I don't know what was discussed. I am a local resident. And you talked about the CIC. Curiously enough, the CIC, which gets those funds for the local community functions, doesn't publish its minutes, doesn't tell you when the meetings are. Is that a good model of stewardship? Is that what we can expect from new towns in London, a completely opaque management?
I'm always interested in ways that we can be more transparent, Assemblymember Boff. So
well, you're not, because I've been asking this for ages, and you still don't publish the minutes, and the CIC still meets in secret. Nobody knows how those decisions are made. And then, if that's good stewardship, well, I don't know.
I think Louise wants to come in, sorry, on this point.
The point that I would make in regards to the topic under discussion today is that we're not proposing a private company for Newtown. So in relation to the Newtown, the models that we are looking at are, there will be that public scrutiny, and we welcome that public scrutiny.
But you will be partnering with developers over the development of these new towns. I am asking that we don't get into the same bugger's muddle that we are in Barking Riverside, where nobody knows what's going on. Nobody. Apart from if you sit on Barking Riverside Limited or if you sit on the CIC. Apart from that, we're clueless, totally clueless about what's happening.
I mean, there's a lot of information, is published on the website in terms of the activity that is taking place. There's been a lot of consultation recently, or certainly will be, regarding. There has been a lot of consultation regarding the new planning permission with the community. So it is not the case that Barking Riverside does not engage.
I never said
it
didn't engage. I said it wasn't transparent, which it clearly is not. I mean, can you give me a commitment to send to me the minutes of the last meeting of Barking Riverside Limited or the CIC, suitably redacted?
As I say, Assemblymember Boff, we do not publish the minutes because we are a private company. As for the CIC, I would have to take that away and speak to our new managing director to investigate that for you.
Well, I think for anybody looking forward to the development of these news towns, this is the kind of reply you're going to get in the future. It's a public company. You don't need to know.
I think Louise has literally just addressed that point in what she just said.
I think we're straying from the topic of new towns here. We have now reached the end of the session. I would like to thank our guests for attending this meeting and for all your contributions today. The committee has a few more items of business to address, but please feel free to leave the chamber while we deal with them. Thank you very much. Can I ask the committee to note the report and the discussion? Can we also delegate authority to me as chair in consultation with party group lead members to agree any output arising from the discussion?
Agreed.
Can I ask the committee to note the work programme and the additional activity undertaken, namely to site visit to Thamesmead Waterfront on the 22nd of January 2026?
On that, Chair, I just wondered, there was proposed a site visit to a suburb of Paris. I'm wondering if this is now viable and what we're going to get from it. I mean, I kind of agreed to it at first, but now it looks like we're going to have no interlocutors at the other end who can guide us through the plan. And I was always a bit dubious as well, because it's a completely different legislative environment in France than it is in the UK. And perhaps a trip to Harlow or Welwyn Garden City might be better.
So the reason it was proposed is because it's very similar, basically, to the context of the urban extensions as you've described them in this meeting that we're going to potentially embark on in London. I received comments from scrutiny earlier of your newly found concerns over it, and I will read them and respond in turn.
Thank you.
Date of the next meeting. The next meeting of the Planning and Regeneration Committee will take place on the 10th of March 2026 at 10 a.m. in committee rooms 2 and 3 City Hall. I have no urgent business, which concludes today's meeting.
Stand by. This is the broadcast.